Councillors, thanks. We're going to get going. We're going to do items... Oi! Do you want to hear this? Oi! Do items 12, 10, 11 next, the top three on the second page here, and that's because a couple of councillors have to leave and want to be part of some aspects of that. So we're going to do that next and then go back to the GM's report, item 7, afterwards. So we're starting with item 12, discretionary transport report. These are all Robin's. So Robin's here, the most important person. So we can, that's page 157. And there is a part of the GM's report that talks about speed management task force update, but that's not going to be affected by any of these can stand alone. We've just checked that. So page 157. Robin, over to you to introduce this item. Thanks.
Thank you. So I guess as a quick background to councillors, we have 3 funding budgets that are currently available in the transport area, which we describe as being discretionary because each year we work out the actual projects that are delivered underneath them. So on page 158, item 3 lists those 3 programs being bus stop infrastructure, minor improvements and integrated transport. So the bus stop infrastructure focuses very much on the accessible curbs and provision of new bus shelters. And the program we are intending to work up through the Joint Passenger Transport Committee with the Regional Council. Minor improvements program is one that we've traditionally focused on safety type improvements. And then the integrated transport initiatives was one that was born out of changes to funding a couple of LTP rounds ago, and the focus for that has been on walking, cycling and PT provision, where that PT provision is about new infrastructure and trying to get them around the network and that sort of thing. So this year we've worked up a program. We have met with the Access Hamilton Task Force, going through the long list of projects that we have. Those projects are identified both by staff, by the public and also by councillors, and presented to you here today as a proposed minor improvements program and a proposed integrated transport initiatives program. And I'm happy to take questions.
So just to get in to look at the details on page 163, am I right, Robin? You've got the tables
so page 160
for what you're proposing.
163 is a general overview of the types of work that we have traditionally done, and then 165 is the 165 and 166 is the detail of those programs, and the sites are captured back in the resolution.
So all of those ones in the last 2 tables are captured also in the staff recommendation up the front?
Correct.
Okay, so the short way of looking at what we're proposing is those page 157 and 158, the tables there, and the details of why we're doing it further back in the report. So I'm relying, councillors, on you having read all of this. It's, you know, when they say take it, we take it as read, that it's always been read by staff. So we've got questions first before we go into debate about any of them. So maybe questions either on the rationale or the particular items themselves. Sorry, we've got a... No, it doesn't help actually. It's so far away I can hardly see the bloody thing. Oh, silly me. I should have just... Gary, just assume the position, you know, right from the start.
Shall I assume the position?
Yeah, yeah.
What does that mean? Okay, look, Dave's just lectured us that we should have all read it, and I have, but I still can't quite tie up the figures to the projects, the budgets to the projects.
Sorry?
Okay, so we've got these projects, install intersections at Queen's Ave, proposed treatments, and then on page 160 there's that sort of graph thing, a graph with some numbers in it.
Table, yes.
The table, yeah, at the
Okay,
top.
so, for example, how much is the, install the mini roundabout in Queen's Ave going to cost?
So each of these projects have been priced up. There's been an estimate given, and the program
It's
that
not
I've...
given here, eh?
No, it's not given here, but the program that I've put forward spends the proposed budget that we have sitting there.
Okay, well,
So it's slightly over, generally we slightly over subscribe the budget because they are estimates based on early concept designs. And once we get into the detailed design and that sort of thing, we will streamline down those budgets. But basically, the proposed sites that are put forward, the proposed pieces of work, spend the budget that is set out in item
Gary,
12.
traditionally, if we had a bit of a discussion about the process here which sort of covered a bit of your point, traditionally we haven't, for instance, the Integrated Transport Fund, we haven't broken that down and voted on the components separately or looked at them. We've debated whether we give them 900 grand or some other amount and left them to go to it within the budget. We're sort of bringing back the list of projects so you know what you're getting as a package, but not the individual items, because the figures aren't final, but the staff have assured us they can fit all of them within the envelope. That's why it's been done like that.
Okay. All right, okay, I guess I just, I find that quite confusing. Sort of surprises me we can't put your estimates beside each of those things and we can see that they do add up, because often we get reports where things don't add up. So do you think it all adds up?
Yes, as I said, it oversubscribes the amount of budget. We hope that once we get into the detailed design and streamline it down, otherwise we will have to do some pruning to fit within budget. We will be delivering within budget.
Okay, well, I'm just not used to approving things when I can't see the numbers, what relates to each project, and making sure they add up, because as I said before, innumerable times things haven't added up in reports we've had.
If I could just add to that, councillor, so when we come back with our financial reports to council, we're monitored against the budgets on page 160. So the line that you'd see would be the minor improvement budget of 637,900. So every time we come back to council, we'll be reporting about our expenditure against that. So that's our target. So our job is to match our spend to that budget. That's the budget we've got, no more.
Okay, so the draft minor improvements program, which is in the box on page 157,
Yep.
which starts with the intersection at Queen's Ave and Killarney and ends at intersection at Clarkin Road and Hebe Terrace.
We'll all come in under
within, well, actually
637.
Robin says it might be slightly over 637,000, is that right?
The estimates would be slightly over,
The
yeah.
estimates are over, but we will deliver under, if that may mean putting some work to do that.
Okay. Okay, so it's not the answer I wanted, not the information I wanted, but I can't get that.
I mean,
by the sounds of things.
separately, I've seen some of the estimates, they were
Yes.
early estimates, so I'm sure staff could supply them to you, but that's not a budget, each of them isn't a budget line item. This is what's being shown here is the budget
So
line item.
this is, and I guess this is the concept of this thing. You guys got some, wiggle room's the wrong word, but you've got a non-allocated budget figure, which you then allocate here. But I just would have liked to have seen what the allocations to each project was. And these might be quite, I guess on your scale of things, these are small things.
The small but are really important because they deliver on a lot of community expectations. But I just come back to our KPI, I guess, if you like, is to be monitored against that budget of 637,900, and what we're contracting with you today is largely those are the 1, 2, 3, 5 projects that we will progress within that budget. Now, if we're massively under, if we get good costs, we'd probably come back during the course of the year to tell you that and maybe add another project. We've got a list this long, and the task force job over time has been to whittle that down to the ones that they think are the highest priority for our community.
And from my understanding, I recognise a number of these projects. There's stuff that we've had some heat on over the last 2 or 3 years, so presumably they're the ones that the community
Yep, with a lot of merit too in terms of safety for that first box. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Paula, please.
Okay, so just a couple of quickies, if I might. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frankton Rail Village on page 158, traffic calming measures. I'm just assuming, but I just want to ask, make sure that it's consistent with the Frankton plan. Is that part of the Frankton plan or is it consistent with it?
Yes, so this is the work that we're doing as a result of the petition we received from Pukeko Street.
So it's got nothing to, no
It
connection?
very much does tie in, because any work that we will do, we will be recognising that Frankton plan and making sure, because that talked about the special character area and that sort of thing.
Okay,
So that is all part of any work that we do. We will be taking that opportunity to incorporate.
I just wanted to know what the interface with that is, was because I don't know enough about it. Thank you. In terms of the let's talk about Wayphone. The cycle facilities at roundabouts.
Which page are you up on the same table?
Sorry, page 165 in the bottom part of the table. Cycle facilities at roundabouts.
Yes.
So just in terms of that, I agree that this work needs doing on roundabouts. Is that across the board, or is that at priority roundabouts that have been seen as the main commuter routes for cyclists? Because
So this funding will allow us to do work at probably a couple of key sites. So we're focusing on the dual lane roundabout, so the bigger ones.
Yeah.
And the aim is to provide an ability for cyclists to get off the road just prior to the roundabout, use a shared path around that quadrant and then get back round. So the funding that we've got will allow us to do a couple of sites.
In the next couple of sites in the next year, and
the next year, and we hope that this is the beginning of a program to go through and retrofit others.
How many dual lane roundabouts do we have? But you might not know that on top of your head. Sorry.
There's probably a dozen to 15 sites that we've identified that we'd like to work on. So to get through them
at a couple, it would take 7 or 8 years to supposedly. I'm just trying to get a handle on.
Each site varies depending on what paths are there and how much work we have to do.
But Paula, could I say that the Access Hamilton Task Force has looked at the budget allocation in that area, and for the LTP we want to have more discussions, because we don't want it to take 7 or 8 years to finish the important ones, but this is what we can start in the annual plan.
Thank you, Dave. So I guess that's my point in asking the question, is to get clarity about what that looks like, so that Council is well informed about that as well. So, but just final question, if I might, the wayfinding signage, which is on page 163, the types of activity thing. Can you tell me more about what's proposed in terms of wayfinding signage?
So the wayfinding signage that we have got funding this year, so we've been successful in getting 50k from the Vibrant Hamilton Trust, and we're putting up a project that has a further 49 from Hamilton City and 51 from NZTA.
How much from NZTA, sorry?
51, so we end up with 150. The focus at this stage will be on the likes of Waiwiri and some of those primary cycle routes. So it's about ensuring that cyclists on those routes know exactly where they are and where the key entry and exit points are. And this work's being developed in with the comms team and their whole signage plan scheme.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So we're just having a discussion about the funding aspect that you just mentioned, because I believe if we get money from an outside source such as Vibrant Hamilton Trust, that's our money that we've achieved, and NZTA should subsidise that as well. So if we're putting up 99 from the city, then 99 or 101 actually should be available from NZTA towards that project. It doesn't matter where we get our money from, and if it does, then that's not something I've ever seen before with NZTA, because there are other councils I've seen get money from, we had money for the Gallagher intersection over there that it was given to us 20 years ago by Gallagher's themselves, and we included that in our money. We also got an NZTA subsidy on. So I would like to have some more discussions on that funding envelope. Sorry, that's just something I wasn't aware of until you answered that, Robin. That's not something we can settle here, but...
no, my understanding is, but I will go away and check, my understanding is that when you are working any project up, and it could be a major arterial or whatever, that you have to take out any third-party funding, and then they share the cost that
like
remains from there.
see
But I
the-
will follow up on that.
I'd like to see the rules about that, because I know that didn't happen with the Gallagher roundabout intersection.
I think this was a particular application that had the three parties funding it, so it was an agreed funding formula, which was that formula that Robin's described. I don't think there's any scope to...
Our financial assistance rate is 51%. It's not 51% except in so-and-so circumstances.
I think you're right, Chris. I remember being involved with the Gallagher one, and it was a deal that we cut with NZTA.
So it wasn't a straight subsidy, and the road is theirs anyway, so it was only the two linking roads that we would have got any NZTA support for. But there was a specific deal cut on that one, wasn't there, between the whole three parties?
That's right, and our costs were minimal costs.
Yep.
I think that's a fairly important principle that we should check on, because there's either a financial assistance rate or there isn't. If there's one that they can chop and change on, then that's a problem.
I'll undertake to go back and review that, but I'm pretty sure it's a specific application that had the funding contribution from each party there, and was agreed by the Vibrant Hamilton Trust.
I think it sold us short. Anyway, sorry, Paula, I interrupted your line of questioning.
No, that was my last one, just to understand where those three were at this time. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Mark.
Didn't we vote to fry that? Oh, no, I didn't. That's right. Okay. Was it out loud? A couple of questions, just very quick ones. Gordonton Road, Wairere Drive to Thomas Road. The report on page, or the bit on page 157, is that the same as 165? What it says there, because they seem to be two different things. One of them is shoulder widening and street lighting, and the other one is the variable speed limit electronic signage.
Sorry, my apologies. I had updated the attachment based on the notification I gave out to councillors, and I hadn't caught up with the front one. So I guess in short, as per the notice I put out to councillors, the intention is for this funding, if approved, to include that variable speed limit.
Sorry, Robin, it's quite hard to hear when you're just talking to the guy beside you.
Sorry. So I had, unfortunately, I had updated attachment 2, but not to the resolution, to include the specific workers, including the variable speed limit. So the intention, as per the note that I put out to councillors on Friday with regard to Gordonton Road, is such that the work included in Gordonton Road will include the variable speed limit.
Can we include that in that table then there? It's not something I saw, it's not in the papers that I get.
It's in attachment 2, it shows up as a variable, but not in the resolution.
Yeah, but I'm talking about I want it in the recommendation, so that it's included in that. And I don't know whether we can, given that it's a table, can we, Amy, add some words into that block?
Thank you.
Include the variable speed sign. Okay.
Is it doable?
Mark, is that all? Sorry?
Oh, I just had one more question in regards to the Queens Ave Killarney Road and the roundabout going back in there. I think it's great that we're changing, etc. But how did they get? Can you walk me through what happened in the first place with that? What was the rationale behind?
So that intersection hasn't had a roundabout previously. It was just a crossroads with way control on the Queens Ave. Both the main Queens Ave leg and also the short leg into the hockey fields. Yep. It had quite a bad crash problem there, and when we looked at the predominant turn movements that were happening, along with changes that had been made to the district plan, which changed Lake Domain Drive from being the arterial, changed that to being Queens Ave. Oh. And that change was made through the district plan change for a number of reasons. One was the amenity type value that Lake Domain Drive has, the alignment that it has, but also the fact that that is, from an asset management point of view, as a pavement that's wet all the time, is one that's very hard to maintain and is one that we really do not want to encourage large volumes of traffic on, and in case of a civil emergency when you are going out and trying to get your arterials back up and running quickly, would be one that would be particularly hard to do that. So we came up with the intersection layout that's there at the moment. I guess the trouble is you see a good idea, and we believe that the intersection layout that we had put forward would be reasonably effective in achieving both the catering for the predominant term but also discouraging the through traffic. We've had mixed feedback. We've got people who love it and we've got people who hate it. So we're now looking at going to a more traditional intersection layout, which is the roundabout. We will be still trying to support the hierarchy on Lake Domain Drive by looking at other alternatives to discourage traffic through there. So the raised table that's just immediately east of the intersection will be retained. And then we'll be working with the speed management task force around things like a 40k restriction and changing some priorities through there to try and reinforce it that way instead.
Okay, thank you. That's all for me, Dave.
Thanks. So Angela, sorry.
Thank you. Just with the Baverstock on the bottom of page 157, I note in there it doesn't mention the bus stops, that we're slightly changing those. You are including that because that's in the list?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's all. Thanks.
So if I could just further to that question, the issue of the speed limit, does that sit within this, on that stretch of Baverstock, does that sit within this item, or is it coming up in the subsequent one?
It's in the speed management report.
So, okay, yes. All right, so that's the other leg of this.
This work will support the lowering of the speed limit to 50.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to put the bus stop, the bus stop infrastructure in here?
It doesn't worry me. That was certainly within our scope of work.
Just to make it clear, it might be worth doing that if we could include that in that table for Baverstock, the road, the second to bottom on page 157 on the right-hand side, when we're listing the components, just bus stops, plural.
Robin, are they recessed?
Recessed hard stand bus stops.
I'm not 100% certain on the exact scope of work for those.
Or just bus stops then?
Yeah, I think it is a bit
generic.
Of changing, yes.
Are you all right with that, Amy? Thanks. Okay, is that all, Angela? Thanks. James, thanks.
Thank you, Robin, for the report. It's good to see that, did Three Idiots putting the sign up have any influence on this out at Gordonton Road?
That was written prior to the sign going up.
That's good. All right. No, just simple questions. All right. Okay, so with Gordonton Thomas, does this include, because it was mentioned before about including hit sticks up Gordonton Road as well?
Yes, so the original scope of work will include what work we can do to encourage lower speeds. We do need to be careful about where we put hit sticks. Gordonton Road is not wide enough at the moment for a car to safely pass a cyclist without going across the centre line. So we do need to be careful about where we actually put those hit sticks, but that sort of work is included in that funding.
All right, I understand that. Look, I had a question from a member of the public about, has there been a traffic counter placed on either North Gordonton or on Thomas Road? Because I just had a question here about why the cars are being counted. It seems the actual amount of traffic is not being taken into consideration. The traffic turning left into Thomas from Gordonton is not counted, nor is the traffic turning right out of Thomas onto Gordonton. Is there a traffic counter? I haven't been...
So what we've got down at the moment, so this is the preparation work we're doing for putting in the variable speed limit. And all we've got out at the moment is some tubes which are monitoring speed through the intersection. So we're not counting the number of cars turning in any direction. The way the variable speed limit is configured will look after those turning movements. At this stage, we're just trying to get some good data about what are the speeds through that intersection now. Within the next week or so, we'll be putting in the hit sticks, and we'll have those tubes will continue to be out there to see what impact that has on the speeds. And then we'll be moving through into the variable speed limit signage operating, and again, we will be doing some monitoring of speeds.
Awesome. So the speed tubes you got across, is that for the traffic on Gordonton?
It's the traffic on Gordonton,
Right,
yes.
okay. So that makes sense now?
It's actually, the tubes are fairly much in the intersection of Gordonton, Thomas,
Yeah.
currently. It's all part of the preparation work we're doing for trying to roll out the...
No, that makes sense. That's cool. And the only other one I had here was, and it's good something's happening because we had the lady here this morning, Sarah, quite emotional. K Road, probably more of a question for the General Manager here. Obviously, Chris, you know about the problems in K Road. You've been onto that?
Yep, we've got quite a number of actions underway on that. I just got to catch up, having been away for a couple of weeks, but there's quite a number of different dimensions to that.
Yep, and I have to thank you for that because the occupants out there, Sean Bradley and Mike and that, are pretty appreciative of that, so good work.
Yep.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, James. Rob, please.
Yeah, just some questions around the subsidies and so forth. I just was having a little bit of difficulty following whether we get any subsidy from NZTA on bus shelters. And it just seems confusing, paragraph 13 with paragraph 9. Can you just, Robin, can you just tell us what the arrangement is? Because I know that there's an element of advertising kind of subsidy that comes in also to fund the cost of bus shelters.
So the bus shelters are subsidised at 51%, and we get that subsidy through the Waikato Regional Council, who in turn claim that money from NZTA.
Okay.
So that's for new bus stop infrastructure.
Yep.
The advertising that occurs through the AdShell shelters and the funding that we get through that, we use to offset the maintenance costs. So that's the cleaning and repairs of the existing shelters that are out on the network.
Okay, so that they don't effectively, the funding that comes from AdShell does not contribute towards the cost of the shelters?
Not new shelters.
No, okay, thank you. Just looking at the table on paragraph 12, is it paragraph? Yeah, paragraph 12 at the top of page 160. Just looking at the operating expenditure, the 30,000, which I think adds to 32,000 and not
Correct.
30.
Yes.
Does that accumulate each year? So each year we spend 1.65 million, in terms of that budget. We add effectively another 32,000 onto our OPEX costs?
It does vary according to the type of work that we're doing. So the work that we're doing in amongst this lot, we have quite a few electronic variable signs, which have a shorter lifespan than some of the other works that we're doing. So it depends on the work that we're doing, really.
Okay, but it would be at least around about that figure.
It'll be in that order.
Be 20 to 40,000 or something like that each year. And we include that into each year's budget as an ongoing OPEX cost?
Yes.
Yep, okay. That you might have already half answered my next question, which the depreciation on 1.65 million at 22,000 is about 1.3%. And I just wondered if that was adequate. I know that included in that list of expenditure there are footpaths and other infrastructure costs which would have a very long economic life. But there's also a VMS trailer with speed radar, refurbished shelters, street lights and signs and so forth that would have enough. Are you confident that appreciation at 22,000 is sufficient to cover what will eventually end up in the financial statements?
Yes, I think, as I said, it's about right. Some of those pieces of infrastructure will be lasting 75 years. Yep. Some of them will be lasting 10 years, so it does vary quite dramatically.
But there's what I'm trying to do here is get to whether or not we're allocating enough to, not just in this area, but across the whole organisation, that we're actually allocating enough depreciation to meet our renewals. And I appreciate that things like the trailer and the signs and maybe the street lights will have a much shorter life. which will need to be renewed in a shorter time period than perhaps the roads and footpaths.
Yeah, the streetlights still have a reasonable life period because they will be the new LED type variety we're going up, so they're not such. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area. I've taken advice, and they're the numbers I've been given. So I'm sorry, I can't answer beyond that.
Thank you. All right. No, that's all my questions.
Thanks, Rob. Mayor Andrew, please.
Oh, Robin, thanks for your report. The roundabout at that you're putting in at the far end of Queen's Ave, at the far end from here. I see there's a development happening on the southwestern corner right now.
Yes.
Just wondering if you can get a bit of land off them and just to help the size of the roundabout. I'm sure Luke's department would, they've already got resource consent obviously and it's underway, but I'm sure our planning department would cooperate and let one of the sections on there be a bit smaller than what it normally would have been, one of the living circles.
So we were aware of that development. I guess the big thing for us was actually getting the timber power pole that was right on that corner.
Yeah, I see a truck took that out in the end.
Yeah, so we had a truck help us out, and then the development's undergrounding. So that was the biggest pinch point that we had for that corner. The reality is, if we want to put a bigger roundabout in, we're looking at significantly intake on probably all four corners. So while we could get a little bit of land there, it's actually probably not going to make much difference to the long-term design that we can accommodate. The work that we're doing under this budget is minor improvements, so it's less than 300,000 per site. We start getting into those sorts of things, and we're looking at major intersection improvements and a very different funding regime needed.
Right now I see that particular quarter of the intersection being the most vulnerable because that's where the cars come around in bulk, and if a car's going to lose it, they're going to go up on that footpath. And I did point out the lamppost should go before the truck took it out. And I just think it's so easy now to take a corner off that property to move the footpath further away from the vulnerable corner there. And right now when there's development going on, it's just so easy for everybody.
Yep, we can have a chat.
Yeah, it is the one corner where if a car loses, it's going to go up on the footpath. The other, I think what you've done there is working really, really well with that, with the roundabout you put in at the far end as well. I just think that house at the far end of that road, the house on Lake Road, when you're coming straight down Queen's Ave, I just think at that T intersection, a crash barrier or a minimum of a illuminated sign, a reflective sign there, just to show arrows going either way to show a car coming down
like
road.
The Clarkin Road one, Andrew.
Yeah, I just see if a car does go over that bank, it's going to go right through the house because the bank's so steep, and there's no way the brakes are going to help. And I just think a minimum of a sign there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just something to consider.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor Andrew. Siggy, yep.
Thank you, Robin, for that report. Just a question. A member of the public just talked to me a couple of days ago about Sandwich Road and the speeding that's happening there. They've only lived there for a few months, but noticed really that people do not go the 50. They go quite fast. So I just have a question about the trailer that we, with the speed on it. How does that, is there a process to get deployed in different areas, or is it when people, just like the public says, can you check how fast people go on Sandwich Road, for example?
Yes.
How does that work?
So basically, we've got a couple of trailers which we deploy around the place. Staff have got a list of sites that we know are popular. So if we don't have any current requests in, then we carry on deploying it around that list. But if we do get a request in, so that can just come in through the main council number, and then we'll get that deployed as soon as we can.
Siggy, you would have read in the report, hopefully, that there's a third trailer is being proposed to be built as part of this program.
Yeah, it's just I would just want to know the process, how people go about.
Definitely don't wait to bring it up at a council meeting. Get them to ring transport straight away, or us.
Yeah. Okay. No, I just remembered when It was just in passing, that person just asked me. In passing, I said, email me, please, and, you know, but, yeah. Just so I ask now, while I remember.
Transport log requests for that, and they've got a lot of requests, but it's quite handy, actually, if people ring them up with complaints, then there's more, it'll elevate it more.
Okay. I hope he will email me.
Sorry, I've got Mark, Leo and Jeff.
Dave, I was just wondering if there's been a mover for the recommendation, because if there's not, I'll gladly do so.
Yeah, I'll take you as moving it, and I'll second it to get it on the table. That removed Jeff. Did you?
Mine wasn't a question.
Okay, Leo.
Speed trailer is on Sandwich Road this morning.
See, it worked. It worked. See, staff are quicker than you are, Siggy.
Well done, Robin.
I don't take any credit for that one.
Good spotting, Leo. Mayor Andrew.
Just a quick one. How do the judder bars work at the driveways on Ward Street?
Ward Street. So, I guess for councillors, we're looking at trying to finish the connection from the Western Rail Trail through to get into the CBD. So on Ward Street, I'm going to call it the northern side, we'll look at making that footpath a shared path and putting some greening across driveways, and then just do a very simple, go down and buy from the local shop. It'd be in yellow and black judder bars, just to try and slow the speed of vehicles coming in and out. It's because a lot of those driveways do not have good visibility for vehicles coming out of them. So it's just about trying to control the speeds.
Up on the shop end of the footpath.
Yeah.
So the driveways that come down between the buildings.
Yes.
Not the driveways that come straight out of the buildings. In some cases there.
Yeah, for any that do. So we're going to have to work with them. It's just making an allowance for trying to look at speed. So, I mean, the tyre place, they probably don't gain too much speed, but coming out of Kmart and some of the warehouse buildings, that sort of thing, they do come reasonably quick out of there. So, yeah.
Thanks. Now, we've got the resolution here. It's been put up. It's got the addition in the Gordonton Road, Thomas Road intersection of the variable speed sign, and for Baverstock Road, it's got the addition of the bus stops, plural. Other than that, it's what you've got written in front of you. It's been moved by Mark, seconded by myself. Does anyone want to talk to that still? Jeff. Oh, sorry, hang on. Mark and then Jeff. Yeah.
Just briefly, really happy to move this, and thank you to the staff for the brilliant work you've done in getting all this together with the money we have or haven't got. It's obviously a really passionate subject for all of us, as we've seen from various actions we've all taken over the last sort of few months. Personally, I'd like to thank James and Dave for getting involved in a project very dear to my heart, which was the Gordonton Thomas. It was a reasonably ugly exercise, but due to some great work from the staff and them forgiving us and working really, really hard with us, I think we're going to get a great resolution. I'm also excited about the Queen's Ave roundabout one, for the reason that, we had a crack at it, and we're not too proud to say that didn't work, let's try something else. And I applaud staff for that, because it shows me that getting a great result for the residents of Hamilton far outweighs ego. And so I'm really, really excited, and I encourage that sort of stuff. If stuff doesn't work, change it back. It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you, staff, for all you've done. Going out to the Baverstock residents, that was a great exercise as well. Everybody wins. Great food as well, from what I can gather. Chris and your team for going out and engaging with the public so willingly. It's been a pleasure to work with you guys on these projects.
You're saying that in the past tense, don't you mean going forward as well?
I'm hoping it will go forward as well. But look, hey, thanks for what you're doing. We do notice it. I know that some of our actions don't necessarily follow, procedure, and they can make you a little bit uncomfortable. But thank you for your good grace during those exercises and the result that's come out. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor Jeff.
Thank you, Dave. Look, I just want to highlight a couple of these that are quite important to me, and one is the Queen's Ave Kalani Road, which I think is probably one of the most talked about little roundabouts in the city. It's not a criticism of staff. I can understand why we did what we did, and as Mark says, I think it's good that we're going to have another go at it. It just didn't work. It is counterintuitive the way we've got it at the moment, and I think the test of that is if you need a sign, a little trailer with a sign telling people how to navigate it, you know, a year after it's been built, you know, it's not working. I think. And the speed I see cars coming along Queen's Ave, I think, you know, a serious accident is quite possible there. So I'm really, really pleased with that. And I think if we get the support for it today, we'll be able to hear the cheers of about 500 hockey families from the Gallagher Centre there, because I hear about it every night I turn up to hockey, not every night, but often I hear about it from hockey parents, and hopefully quite a few of them live in the West Ward.
They're all from the east. They're wealthy areas.
Probably bloody are. They're well off. Rototuna people. Hey, I'm also delighted. I'm also delighted with the little the hidden queue sign on Cobham Drive. There's a sign there at the moment, but you just don't see it often. And myself, I've ripped around there at rush hour going south before and had to jump on the brakes and change lanes to avoid going straight up someone's back of the car. So I think that's really good. The Anglesey Street and Anzac Parade roundabout gives me nightmares, honestly. I haven't done that roundabout for about 4 years because it just stresses me out, so I just navigate around it. I'm really pleased to see the lane that we'll put in for buses, but we've still got huge problems with that roundabout, you know, because of the bottleneck on Victoria Street. So at some stage we need to really sort that one out. And the last one I just want to mention is the new VMS trailer that we're going to get, because I can really vouch for that. It's brilliant when you get someone complaining about speed, that you can talk to staff, and this trailer turns up pretty quick, and it's wonderful to be able to go around there to the person who's complained and say, look what I've done. You know, it's at least it shows that we're listening. You know, and so I think it's a great thing to have.
Siggy's going straight to her Sandwich Road friend's place after this meeting.
Exactly. It's not normally as fast as that, but yeah, thank you, everyone. That's great.
James, thanks.
Thanks has to go to Chris and for Robin for, you know, like, I think you're seeing now you've got a council full of councillors that are more into doey, less hooey, and getting things done. And I think that, you know, most of the complaints I've had as a new councillor have been traffic related, either parking or traffic and everything else. And the big one has been Gordonton Thomas and also K Road with me. But when we have tasked staff to have a look at things, how we can do it differently, they've got on board and they've done it, and they're doing it now, which is really good. Because look, the amount of traffic accidents we have at Gordonton Thomas and the amount of near misses is huge. And Mark and I get it every day. You know, because there was just an accident again last week, and we, you know, found out about it. It's been reported to us. Dave got on board and got into it as well, and I think you know, the pressure put on has finally told, and we can get something positive done here where we don't have, you know, if there's going to be an accident there, hopefully if we get the variation in speeds, it's going to be less impact, less trauma on the road. Hey, I'm not a police officer anymore. I never was a traffic cop like Leo. But look, I've attended enough traffic accidents in my time to want no more to happen. And you know, when I'm a councillor in the East Ward, I don't want any deaths in the East Ward. You know, a bit like Mark with the voting of the zero thing. So just thanks to the staff for putting the effort in.
Thanks. Okay, we're going to just put the recommendation there with those couple of minor additions that we talked about. I'm going to put that to a show of hands. I might as well. Those in favour, against, and Siggy and Paula are talking. But they were both in favour, I'm sure. Yeah, there, see? Unanimous. Okay, thanks. Robin's staying here because we're moving straight on to item 10, which is the proposed speed limit bylaw change, page 79. Fire away, thanks, Robin.
Okay, so I guess for the new councillors, the joy of a bylaw process requires us to go through a number of steps legally in order to make any changes to the bylaw, and speed limits are one of those things that are set through the bylaw process. So the first step in the process is known as a determination report, and fairly much is a consideration of the issues that are being faced and whether or not a bylaw is the best way of dealing with it. We are lucky for speed limits that it's fairly clear cut, because the land transport rule for setting speed limits requires us to have a bylaw in place to set speed limits. So the first report is fairly much a tick box exercise, but one that we need to work through such that council determines that a bylaw is the most appropriate mechanism, and then approves the next step, which is a statement of proposal, and is the next report that we will then consider.
So just be clear on that, councillors, we're not voting on the actual roads we're going to consider in this item. We're voting that's 3B there, approves the preparation of the statement proposal, which follows as the next item. Correct. So we're just talking about the process here alone here. And has everyone got this thing here? Okay. So any questions? I'll move the recommendation as it is, seconded by James. Oh, sorry, Leo, he beat you. You got questions? Oh, I can't see Gary's name. Oh, Gary.
And I didn't have a question, I was just going to move it, but you've done that.
Oh, well, Gary can take over.
No, I don't.
He just wants to prove he
was
here.
To me. Just, we all work hard to get this technology and then we completely don't use it.
Siggy.
Process, is there a certain time frame to it, or it just depends?
It depends on the topic being considered. I guess to give you a feel for the speed limits we're looking at, we're just starting the first step, and we will have, all things going well, the speed limits in place on the 30th of January, and that would be considered probably as fast as you could go. Because of the various legal requirements around consultation and the various meetings that we need to hit.
So it's about 6 months,
yes,
sort of process. Thank you. That's all I want to know. Yep.
Yeah. But we note that there's a quicker process in place for Gordonton Road, because that's a pilot project by NZTA itself officially.
Yes, so we're going to get a Gazette notice done by NZTA for approving the use of the variable 60 at that intersection.
So you think a couple of months for
yes,
that process, which is a special process, not the normal. Okay, so we've had the question. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Just briefly, so is there a way of that special pilot program, because you can only do a pilot once, really, can't you? So is there a way, if there was an emergency, that we could do it, or there's nothing we can do?
So this was, I guess, one of the issues that was discussed in the submission that we did on the speed limits rule 2017. So one of the proposed changes to that rule is to allow for emergency speed limits, but emergency speed limits, emergencies are defined as in civil defence type emergencies, which is why we put up the idea of being able to develop a speed management plan instead. So currently the short answer is no, unless we have a civil emergency.
Right.
The aim was to try and get the Ministry of Transport to start looking at and understanding that actually our ability to respond to changing needs is somewhat hampered at the moment, and you know, we're lucky 6 months is probably a very quick turnaround for a speed limit change. And the likes of Baverstock Road and those sorts of ones, we've been able to sneak into the process at the last minute. If they hadn't been raised until next week, then they would have had to wait for another 12 months before we started the process again. So the submission that we did to the Ministry of Transport was suggesting that the rule be changed, that instead of our bylaw process being the way of setting the speed limit, was that councils be given the option of developing a speed management plan, which set out the proposed work for the next 3 years, for example, but also had in there some key principles of things, of ways of dealing with, say, for example, a new school. You would have a principle in there that a new school will have a 40k past its front gate, and then depending on where it was, you would determine whether that was a variable 40 or a permanent 40.
But you wouldn't have to have a special bylaw for that school, that road.
That's right. You would. The aim was that if you could do all your consultation for that speed management plan as part of your old TP process, because I mean the key part of the bylaw process is ensuring that you've gone through adequate public consultation.
Right.
So the idea was that if you had a speed management plan, you could tie that in with, say, a long-term plan type thing, because that would be where your funding to then deliver the work would be captured. And then as and when the work was done or a change happened, that you could implement it via a resolution of council. That was the request that we've put through to the ministry for them to consider.
And when's the response due on that?
My suspicion is that the response will be thank you, but it's beyond the scope of the current bylaw review process. The current rule process. I guess at best we can just hope that it gets picked up, and then we've got to use avenues like Local Government New Zealand and that sort of thing to continue to advocate for some change.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. So look, I'll put that recommendation, number 3, paragraphs A and B. Those in favour raise their hands, thanks. Those against? Yeah. Yeah, no, I took that, just a delayed reaction. Okay, that's carried unanimously. We're on to item 11, page 83, councillors, and this is the statement of proposal with the specific changes in here. And Robin, talk us through adding Baverstock there, which you've got in the attachments, I think.
Yes. So back in March 2017, I came to this committee and put up a list of sites where we wanted to go out and do some early engagement, and they're listed under clause 14. So we completed that engagement process, and while preparing this report, we've had 2 additional sites added. So Baverstock Road is one that at the time of writing the report we were aware of it. We were able to undertake some early engagement with both the community and our key stakeholders, and I can report back on that all went very well, and everyone's in support of the lower speed limit to 50. We also did get specific feedback on Te Kowhai Road East under item 20. There was a mixed response there to the proposed 50, but at the end of the day we are still proposing to go with the 50 because we think that that's the simplest change out there, and just trying to not end up with a multiple of different speed limits through there. And the other change that we have made that was a slight difference to what we first asked you about in March was Rotokauri Road, where we had a section of 60k proposed, and the feedback that we got from both residents and from our key stakeholders was, again, try and simplify things. So instead of having heading out of town a 50, a short length of 80 and then going into the 60, just to make that all 60. So we've implemented that change. So in the attachment, which is the statement of proposal, I have captured the change for including Baverstock Road. Further to the notice that I put out to councillors on Friday in regard to Gordonton Road, because this report had already been published at the time, I would like to propose an amendment to the resolution.
Have you got it written?
I have got that with the team, yes. So
can we put that up specially, Amy, please? Thanks.
Just so that we specifically include that in the statement of proposal. And I think that's it from me.
So, subject to us reading that, I've got the whole thing moved by James and seconded by Angela. Thanks. So, questions now from Mark and then Rob. We'll just get. We'll draw attention to that one in a sec. The
Wairui Drive one north past the Mighty King off ramp, so that's the top of that bridge, isn't it?
It's not even quite that far. So basically where the legal speed limit is at the moment, it's sort of midway in that off-ramp, and we just want to take it to the northern end of that off-ramp so that drivers are not getting, it makes it easier for us to put a sign in, because legally we have to have a sign on the left-hand side. And at the moment, if we put it there, it kind of makes it look like that off-ramp has got an 80k, which is not what we're desiring. So you have to do both directions. Yes. So it just means that we're encouraging people to slow a little bit before the intersection as they come in. Yes.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, sorry, we've got Rob. Yep. Sorry, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. First question is on paragraph 21, Rob, and you mentioned that there are a number of additional locations identified for speed limit changes, and these are on a register. Is that register quite large in terms of the length of the list? Quite long?
Yes, we do. We get a number of requests from the public. They're primarily lower speed limits, so the 40k. They generally are associated with inappropriate speed, you know, your Baverstock type, your Sandwich Road type discussions. So the first thing we do is put the speed trailer out there, but we're capturing that list such that when we meet with the Speed Management Task Force, we can start putting this into a program of works.
Okay, so as each of those on that register might come to the top of the list and be considered similar to the ones in paragraph 14 today, do we have to update our bylaw, or do we have a new bylaw that specifically, say if Sandwich Road became an area for a slower speed, would we have an amended bylaw for that?
Yes, so in order to implement any speed limit change, we have to go through the full bylaw process.
So we kind of go through the same process again,
yes.
And it might be only for 2 or 3 if there are only 2 or 3 in that particular...
My recommendation would be, given the amount of work that's involved in doing the consultation and that sort of thing, that we're better off bundling up a bigger package than 2 or 3. I guess these ones that we have picked off here were ones that I thought were very simple and were ones that have been sort of on hold for quite a while, and I thought were quite important. In the future, that Speed Management Task Force will be able to give some direction as to what that program looks like.
Okay.
Recognising that, you know, there is cost involved in implementing the work. Sometimes it's merely a sign change, but sometimes it is about doing some physical works and some education and engagement as well.
Right. Okay. So back when I came on council in 2013. We had these developments going on, like the Casey's Avenue one, you know, where we really slowed the whole street down by putting sort of traffic islands all across. And I know that work got deferred pending the outcome of a national study that was being done. And I know, Robin, that you were involved nationally on that study. Is that all complete now, that study? And if I think it is. I think it is completed.
Yes.
Are we now going to return back to that development that we were looking at in terms of taking other streets like Casey's Avenue and slowing them down like we did, or is that now a thing of the past?
I guess that's going to be the task of the Speed Management Task Force, is to actually determine that. So the safer speed areas are what you were referring to. The last sort of tranche of work that we did for safer speed areas certainly wasn't as intensive as the likes of Casey Ave as far as the physical works that we did out there. But this is very much going to be one of the questions that we put to that Speed Management Task Force. You know, we have this list. We do now have the Speed Management Guide, the national guide, and it supports the use of 40Ks in residential streets, so it reinforces that safer speed area approach. But the task force are going to be the ones that have that job of working out how fast and where.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the reasons I suspect Casey Avenue became a target is that it became known as a rat run, didn't it?
It was, yes.
And, of course, every decision that you make to slow any street down creates a rat run somewhere else, doesn't it?
It doesn't.
It may not have been a rat run, but the slowing down the likes of Boundary Road would then have created the rat run that became Casey's Avenue. So we're aware of all that when we do look at slowing down some major streets,
Yes.
that these rat runs might get created as a result?
I believe that when we go and do the work, that's certainly something that we look at, and I don't think we're necessarily against the use of these streets as rat runs, but it's about how people drive when they go through there. So we want people to be safe, and we want people to be comfortable out walking and cycling, for example. So the streets can still be used as a shortcut, but we don't want people going through there really fast, which is what unfortunately some people do when they're using it as a rat run. It's because they're trying to beat somebody else who's used the standard route.
Agreed. With new streets, and presumably in many cases with new streets, developers fund those. Do we exert any influence on the developers to make sure that those streets are designed so that medium to long term they will already be what we call a safe street for?
Yes.
So the design is such that it is?
Yes, we do. We've got that included through the district plan and through the infrastructure technical specification. So we certainly are encouraging it to be built such that 40 would be the,
might be a default
that's right,
kind of speed.
yes, and that it's been built to support that, and that even without a sign in place, that would be what people sort of default to naturally.
Does that create any challenges for council? Because there may be some additional costs for developers to do that?
I don't believe so, because it's just about the way that they're building it. We are certainly, based on our experience with the sort of traffic calming measures that we could use, so things like speed humps and those sorts of things, we work very closely with them to try and make sure that we're getting infrastructure that's not going to create a maintenance issue for us in the longer term.
Yep. Okay.
So it is about trying to be clever about where we put them, and also the types of materials that they're using, such that they do survive basically.
Because even some, I'm thinking here of a street that runs off where my home is, called Tahuia Drive, which is designed in such a way that it is almost a speed track because of the way that they've looped the road around to get as many houses along there. So, and that's only a relatively recent road. So we would have abilities within council to get the developers to redesign a road like that if they were trying to build one now, or do these things just happen as a result of?
We certainly try and work very closely with them as early as possible. So that's where we have the pre-app meetings with the developers and try and look at those sorts of layouts. Yeah, okay. And we certainly try and get in early so that they're not wasting a lot of time and energy with designs that we have concerns about.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah, Robin, I'm a little bit confused with the variable speed for Gordonton Road.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean that some time of the day it'll be 80 and some time of the day it'll be 60?
Correct.
Okay. So, depending upon what is being used on Thomas Road, my understanding is that it will flash up as 60 if there's heavy traffic on Thomas Road. Is that correct?
So the 60k speed limit through that intersection on Gordonton Road, but through that intersection, will be triggered by two things. One will be vehicles coming out of Thomas Road, and at this stage there's insufficient room for us to say whether that's just left or right turning traffic. So it'll be any car pulling out of Thomas Road will trigger the 60. And we're also going to have detectors so when you're coming from the north and turning right into Thomas Road, so if you're on Gordonton Road and you're turning across the northbound traffic, that will also trigger the 60k. So what we're trying to do is make sure that if there's any turning manoeuvres going on within that intersection, then it will have that lower speed limit in place.
Okay. So how many of these, should we say, lit signs will there be in that particular area?
So there will be one in each direction, from each
okay.
direction, yes, on Gordonton Road.
So if somebody's actually passing that sign and it changes from 80 to 60, and would we be able to take any enforcement action on that?
In all honesty, I don't expect that there's going to be a lot of enforcement action taken there. It's a relatively short length, and I guess when we were looking at the options for this intersection, we worked through the argument that it's a busy intersection and that 60 might be on quite a lot. And so you could then say, well, perhaps you should just make it a permanent 60. But our feeling was that a permanent 60k sign is relatively boring and actually will not attract the attention of the drivers in the same way that this variable is going to, because it's going to be the same as what we use for our variable 40s outside the schools. So it will be a well lit up sign. It will have the wig-wag lights operating as well. So we've been working closely with Glenn Bunting from NZTA, and we believe that this will actually have the best impact of, you know, when there are vehicles turning within that intersection, we will get the lower speeds. But that's why we're doing all the monitoring, both in advance but throughout the implementation period to ensure that we are getting what we are hoping for.
So this will work the same way as I struck it on the Foxton Strait, which is the first time I struck the variable message signs. Totally confused me, and I thought, what the hell's going on here? Foxton Straits. Yep. Are we really looking at the issue here? Is the issue not the size of that particular intersection, not the speeds?
I think that I see this very much as being a short-term solution. I see a longer-term solution being that we need to do a major upgrade of this intersection. But I see that as also being something that needs to be discussed through the LTP process. And so this is something that hopefully will make that intersection safer for the time before we can make a decision as to what the long-term solution for it is.
Leo, there's also a proposal, not a proposal formal yet, but a concept that at that intersection the road will go off through the R2 area on the east and sort of replace Gordonton Road as the arterial route. So that's temporary also because that work's being thought through at the moment.
Would it be fair to say that when you look at the TCR reports and all that sort of stuff, is speed the main contributing factor there, or is it failing to you right away?
I think it's a bit of both. I think people are not judging the gaps correctly. So people are coming out of Thomas Road have been in a 50k environment and are probably not thinking about the fact that the traffic on Gordonton Road is going 80. I think that there is such congestion at that intersection now that people, by the time they actually get to the front of the queue, are quite frustrated. And in some cases probably a little bit intimidated towards actually just having to take a gap. It mightn't have been their first choice to go, but they kind of feel that, you know, everyone's been waiting such a long time now. So I think that what we're seeing there is a symptom of growth and is just the huge numbers of vehicles moving through that intersection. And as I said, I see this as a short-term solution, pending some decisions around what a longer-term solution will look like.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Leo. Martin, and then Paula.
Generally speaking, beyond this, do I assume and anticipate we're going to do sort of work on other areas, problem areas, and I want to take the learnings from this around, when we look at Peacocks and the growth down there, and just want a list of any other road that basically, with the exception of a major arterial that is in excess of 50 or 60k. Yes, it just seems to me that we're playing the catch up here.
Mm-hmm. That's why the Speed Management Task Force, that's going to be
that's good.
The challenge that they have is to have a look at that and work up a program.
And sort of what I'd look for is, if we took, for example, the Peacock's growth cell, is we actually get in some predictors around anticipating, traffic growth, and particularly in that peri-urban area, so that we don't kind of, look, these things happen, but we try and learn from previous experience.
Thanks, Paula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've lost the page. I wrote it on my scribble on, but the tenure of the question was around, in terms of this variable speed limit, Gordonton, if you are relying on a behaviour shift and public awareness to achieve some gains here, having said that, so we hope people will drop their speed according to the sign. But if they do, and they drop down to a 60 kilometres, then is there enough known about the benefits of that in terms of reduction on numbers or severity of accidents? I mean, I know that if you have an accident at 80 kilometres an hour, it's pretty dire chances for you. At 60%, is it reasonable chances for you, or is it still pretty dire?
So for a right angle crash, 50 is desirable. And
well, a desirable maximum, put it that
desirable
way.
maximum, yes.
We knew what you meant.
So 60 is certainly a lot more desirable than 80, and I think it gives the idea with the flashing lights. What we believe is it's just going to heighten awareness of the people who are on Gordonton Road to understand that, you know, the light is flashing because cars are turning. So it's about them, I guess, being proactive and keeping an eye out for those turning vehicles and being more accommodating of people making mistakes, if they do make mistakes. So,
well, they do make mistakes,
yes,
don't they?
Yes, and so we're expecting that there will be a good reduction. But as I said, this is a short-term solution.
Okay.
There does need to be a longer-term solution
And
developed.
so the widening of the left turn lane and all that will happen at the same time?
That's been done. So that was done last year. We did some minor improvements last year. And yeah, so this is the next, and we think probably we're running out of things to do.
So I'm interested through you, Mr. Chair, just around our approach to, because we seem to be biting off one problem area and another problem area and a roundabout here and an intersection there. But in terms of, and that's fine, we've got to do that. But in terms of how we deal with all of the major interfaces between the outside of the city and the inside, all the entrance ways is what I'm talking about. I'd like to think that we get to a point where we're consistent about what it looks like when you exit an outside area and enter the city, and it should be kind of consistent so that people understand that. Some of our entrances to the city don't look like you're entering into a urban area straight away, and
that's the work of the Speed Management Task Force that Leo's chairing.
Cool.
To get that consistency going, and the default option being the obvious option and things like that. And we've got some catch up to do, but there's some in the meantime, while the year or two that's going to take.
It's going to take a year or two.
No, well, to implement some of them maybe, but certainly to get some urgent safety measures put in place.
So the focus is having a sort of more common.
The focus is on being consistent and safe across every part of the city, really. Okay. All country roads that are in the city treated with decent speed limits and that. Sorry, just before Mark goes, I'd like to I know he's got a plane to catch, there aren't any more questions. I'm wondering if we could move to the vote on this, unless anyone really wants to speak on it. It does include, you can see added in there, the Gordonton Road variable 60k speed limit. So is there anyone that desperately wants to speak? Because I'd be good to have Mark here for that. Okay, I'll put the resolution on the board. We'll go to the voting board here. No one ever said that electronics would speed things up, did they?
And we waited such a long time for the system, didn't we?
Has anyone not voted? It's 12 carried. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Okay. James has to leave and Mark has to leave, so apologies from them. You can do Mark's vote for him there, Jeff.
Take that away.
Yeah. So, councillors, let's do at least some of item 7. Sorry, the GM's report. I know Myrie's been waiting for ages That's all right, she didn't have much work to do. So that's on page 21. And I'm just wondering, Chris, is it possible to pick out the waters ones? Is that worth doing, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you can we're going to skip over that one really.
The speed management one, we've done that in the items we've just done. So
I have to go briefly at 10 to 4. I'm very keen to cover the heritage before that time.
yeah, fine. Well, keep that in mind. So the waters ones, the project watershed. Maury, do you want to come up and Maury and Bridget, sorry, and we'll do your lot as soon as we can. So how are you going to do this, Chris?
Yep, so Maury and Bridget will just talk to that or just take it as read and ask questions. I think the first one, Project Watershed, was just a request from councillors for a 101 on Project Watershed and how that works. So I think we're probably happy to answer any questions on that.
We'll do the questions on each item, if there are any. If not, we'll move on to the next item. You've got the outline of watershed there, which is through until from 6 to 11 paragraphs. Any questions? If not, let's go to Valley Terrace, which Maury's been... Oh, sorry.
Are there any issues on Project Watershed? It tells us what it is, and it's to do with stormwater and a coalition between us and Chris had that faraway look in his eyes.
I
haven't got a clue.
There's no current issues around Project Watershed, so this is more just information, just in response to a question from councillors.
I would just add that though, 21. Councillor, we do have significant issues in our stormwater portfolio and the effects of urbanisation on streams. So you'll see that coming through the 10-year plan when we come up, and I think the first touch points tomorrow in the business we're in, where we look at stormwater. So we are starting, we've spent 3 years sort of planning through ICMPs and looking at data and evidence, but the evidence is pointing to erosion effects caused by urbanisation, which we've got to deal with. So there is some interaction with Project Watershed, but you'll see that as a feature of our stormwater activity as we talk to you over the next 6 months through the 10-year plan, starting tomorrow.
Would I be right in saying that just about all of the flooding we've seen on our TVs the last 3 or 4 months has been a stormwater issue, isn't it? This is rain, heavy rain, or rivers flooding. Yep. So it's not sewage issues.
It's storm water and weather events which have an impact on our wastewater systems. But we've been very lucky or fortunate here in Hamilton that we just haven't had those types of events. Doesn't say that we won't have them. But we've been quite fortunate when you look around.
Sorry, just be clear on that one, Chris. Is it because we haven't had the extremes that the rest of this country has, which is good luck, really? Yeah. Or is it because our system's really swanky?
I'll check with Murray, but I think it's good luck more than anything. We've certainly had some significant events, and 1 in 10 year, 1 in 100 years at times, but it hasn't manifested itself in mass flooding.
Right? Yeah, the significance of an event or its ability to cause flooding is generally related to the duration of the event and the intensity of the event. So if you suddenly get a huge amount of rainfall in a very concentrated period, then your systems might be overwhelmed, and that could result in flooding. So yeah, we have had some significant events, and we have had localised flooding, but not to the extent that's seen in other areas of the country at the moment.
On occasions, I've had emails from people who've had sewage on their back lawn as a consequence of flooding. Are we on top? And this is a big undirected sort of question, but are we on top of that sort of stuff?
That's a result of inflow from the stormwater system, and that flows into the wastewater system and basically consumes all the capacity within the system, which causes
it leaves the system.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, and that's something we've got a number of areas around the city that I guess are sort of under monitoring, and we're going through working out plans to actually address those deficiencies, how we can reduce I&I, how we can improve capacity, inflow and infiltration, and how we can increase capacity and storage to try and minimise those kind of things happening.
Presumably, all other things being equal, the greater the intensification, that will start impacting on our system more and more, won't it? Intensification won't ease that. If intensification does anything, it will worsen that, wouldn't it?
Correct.
Because that would be more impermeable surfaces and things like that.
Yeah, you can think of a pipe's got capacity and it's got some capacity to take stormwater, but if it's full of wastewater, it's got reduced capacity.
If there's 10 toilets where there were one, you've got 10 times as much.
But that's something that we're monitoring on top of, and you will see, and you saw it in the last LTP, we put forward programs to deal with that. We've been developing those programs, and you'll see them come through again in this 10-year plan, and we're ready to launch with some pretty big interventions to deal with that. Some pretty big duplications of mains down the western side of Hamilton, etc. So we understand it. We're on top of it as best as we can be. I think there's no wastewater system anywhere in an urban area where you can stop this happening.
Yep.
Depending
well, you just couldn't afford it, could you?
You just couldn't afford the containment to deal with the extreme event. So there's a lot of work that we do to deal with dry water overflows, wet water overflows. So there's some huge programs coming through the 10-year plan that you'll be seeing very shortly.
So they'll be reflected in our AMPs, and also it'll come through, and they get reflected through into what you guys put up for the 10-year plan.
Yes. Yep, and some of you may have recalled last time we talked about big storage systems that we're proposing. So we're following the Auckland solution is to put some really big tanks in strategic locations to just hold wastewater for a period of time while the storm event passes, and so we don't
have the swales worked? Have they been a useful...
Well, swales are more about our stormwater system, and more about just cleanliness and quality of stormwater getting into the environment. But so I remember not having pipe systems is quite useful.
Did this, like, I remember going out at John Webb's development out there, and did that work? Has that been proven, or is that still being tested?
Well, Murray, they're proven.
I guess it's quite early on in the whole sort of situation, so we're still monitoring how effective they are compared to other sort of alternative designs.
But there's building out there now, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's development out there now.
So
so that development was built on with the swales as being the solution.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
one of the
you've got confidence that those swales will be able to. I'm not asking for that sort of estimate, but you've got confidence that as the building goes on out there, those things can continue. Because I do remember it was an experiment, it was a trial, wasn't it?
I think it's the new way of dealing with stormwater. So they do have challenges for us. One of the things, once again, you'll see come through the 10-year plan is just the maintenance of all of these systems. So we're getting more and more ponds and wet swales and wetlands, etc., to deal with water. So they're quite maintenance heavy. So part of the work we do is to try and coordinate all of those things, so we get strategic devices and not lots of multiple devices to deal with that. So we do have some maintenance problems, but they do work. Although we did have an incident last week or 2 weeks ago where on the one of the Rototuna developments where a soakage system was clogged up and caused some flooding on a property. So things do go wrong at times, but generally they're well designed and they should work well.
And a swale's just a nice name for a drain, an open drain.
Yep.
What work have we done in terms of safety? I mean, we've now got built up areas around these swales. They're not on farms anymore. Yep. So you've got lots of kids playing around and...
Yep. So there's a lot of practical advice that we give about how to design swales so they're safe. So, if people fall in them, they can climb out of them, and that's swales and ponds. It's not just swales, it's treatment ponds as well. And in some cases there might be fencing, but generally they're not fenced, but they are a lot of design goes into them to make sure they're safe if people fall in them and they can climb out of them.
And mosquitoes?
Mosquitoes.
Slugs and bugs?
Bugs and slugs.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of semi-serious, but you know, you're now in the city, and there's this swale stroke drain outside you, or you know, very close. Yeah. And my understanding is mosquitoes love that.
I guess that's a factor of detention in terms of the longer the water is detained, becomes stagnant, the more likely that you'll get mosquitoes. So, but we don't have anything directly in place that I'm aware of around mosquito control.
You haven't had people saying, waking up.
We haven't had dengue fever in Hamilton.
No.
Generally, I don't think we have stagnant water in these things, Murray.
Sorry?
We don't have stagnant water in
No, generally it's flowing. Maybe in the middle of summer they might get quite low flows, but the volume of water would be quite low as well.
There's always DDT anyway, isn't there?
Thank you, Gary. With that, we'll move on to Paula.
I'm not going to comment on that bit. I just was going to mention when the question came up that Watershed is connected to the activities of the Central Catchment Committee. That's how the money gets spent through a collaborative process. We've got a representative on that committee, and it's me, and we're going to attend, right? So they've just started to, they have got some budget that needs to be reallocated, hasn't been spent. It's more than just stormwater, it is things like erosion control and urban streams and a lot of other things as well, potentially even parts of our river plan. So there was a strategic workshop that took a large part of a day, which I couldn't attend, but you did, didn't you? Yes. So what I would suggest, Dave, is because it would take up more time than we wouldn't be able to do it justice. But I do believe a sort of, when they've got that strategic direction, it's probably worth bringing that back to council for a more holistic consideration. That way that council will be able to give me and staff some guidance about what persuasion we want to put on the committee to get things funded the way that fits with Hamilton's best future. So I'm just saying that because at the moment I do feel I'm being very well supported by staff, but I do feel like I'm sort of floating a little bit off to the side, and that not everyone understands how this fits and how we can make the best use of it. So I'll leave that there.
That's a good pun. Floating off to the side.
Oh yeah, okay. I didn't even recognise that. It was a good one, wasn't it?
The General Manager has taken a note. He's going to work that into the program, which should come back before we deal substantially with the LTP, because if there's things to do with parks, for instance, we'd want to know that while we're doing the LTP.
Yeah, because we've also had considerable conversations around some of the riverside erosion lately, and how we...
Could I ask the CEO, and the Deputy Mayor to turn around and face the meeting, not to face each other and talk?
So just in terms of that other significant issue, the riverside erosion that we're all putting our head against, it's actually quite a serious problem for some of our residents, and something that we can't just shy away from having, a solution to. So yeah, like I say, I would like that to come because I'd like to feel that I had more buy-in from the wider council. Thanks.
Thanks. And Rob, thanks.
Yeah, just one quick question, Murray, and that's around 10 and the fourth bullet point. Will we be able to claim Project Watershed on the erosion that we've had with our water pipes down at the gardens? I know there's some insurance matters going on there too, but it seems to me that in terms of that explanation there, that's a dead cert for a claim.
Not under Project Watershed, because Project Watershed, the agreement excludes anything that's supporting any kind of infrastructure. So because the erosion or where the subsidence occurred was directly around one of our assets, the expectation is that that would be a cost to council to maintain and to respond to any erosion that occurred.
Well, but doesn't it say there specifically...
It could be the opposite.
Excluding, I'm sorry, I misread that. My apologies, I misread that. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
But that can come up again for discussion when we have the watershed strategic look.
There is another point of view on that. That's right, that's a current thing, but we are talking about what the future looks like as well. And there are some funds, it's hard to get from the regional council, but it's not impossible to get money for emergency funding as well. So we might want to look freshly at that, that's all I'm saying.
Yep, thanks. Okay, thanks. We'll move on to Valley Terrace, Maury.
Yes, so just a quick update, which wasn't reflected in the report when it was finalised. So I'm really pleased to say that good progress has been made here, and we've reached received acceptance from the neighbouring properties around the proposed solution moving forward. So that means they've come on board with moving forward with a piped solution, and that allows us now to move into further consultation with the wider community that backs onto the Valley Terrace Gully around what's been proposed. And from that point, we should be able to start consenting processes, get more understanding of costs and timeframes, which will hopefully be reported back on the 12th of September GNI meeting.
Okay, thanks. Any questions on Valley Terrace then? Jeff, thanks.
Question.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Oh, Gary's next, is he? I keep trying to forget him, but he doesn't let me.
What are the cost implications of, where will the costs fall?
At the moment, we're just getting the engineering estimate completed based on the piped solutions, so I'll be reporting back on that at the 12th of September meeting.
Including the costs, Gary.
Okay, so we don't know, I guess finding out what the cost is going to be is one issue. Finding out who is responsible for the costs is something I thought we'd know already. Is that not?
Yes.
Yep, so we brought a report to council previously, and council have resolved to largely meet the costs. There is a small contribution that we're looking for, maybe in the form of planting from the owner, but that was all covered in the previous report.
Okay, so it is our cost.
So we've dealt with that. It's just the quantum of the cost now, and we actually put a figure on it, which I think was quite big, and hopefully that's reducing maybe. Yeah.
It's the GM telling the water manager, hopefully it's reducing, Maury.
So that will come through as a
so there's a
under and over
to
in our
bring
audits.
Back to growth and infrastructure with the details of the cost. So it's quite a definite resolution. We've got to bring it back to GNI before we commit. And that's the 12th of September meeting that Maury talked
Yes,
about?
that's right.
Yep. Okay, Jeff.
I know there's still a little way to go with this particular issue, but I just very quickly wanted to acknowledge the work that staff have done. I've got friends on Horn Street there who just really appreciate the way they've been dealt with. Very tricky issue, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Rob, and then
just
Siggy.
an updated question. My recollection was that the pipe solution was by far the most expensive option in terms of the options that were then available and then being discussed. Am I correct in recalling that?
Yep. Look, I think the report indicated that, but there's lots of different dimensions to it as it's been unfolding, and the cost to actually open trench it has proved to be quite high and difficult as well, just with the geography.
So you'll bring all that back in the report?
We'll bring all that back with the optimum solution, which is we think is emerging to be a pipe solution, but probably a better and more enduring solution than open draining.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Siggy.
Yeah, just checking, Harry Bulkhead is still involved, isn't he? In the
Harry, I mean, we've kept Harry involved, but that I guess now that we've sort of got alignment with discussion with Christina, that's starting to be phased out. So Harry will be brought in as he's needed, or as Christina believes he's needed.
So he had some ideas about the piping and everything.
Yes.
And the costing. They were quite different from the council costing.
Yes.
So can we go with his suggestions as well? Because
we've taken on board all that feedback, and it's likely that we will use a lot of his suggestions, but we still have a differing opinion in terms of the cost that he proposed versus the cost that we've estimated.
But we're going to see all of that, Siggy, at the next meeting, and we can
No.
compare his ideas with ours, and there's a whole lot of access issues which were not fully worked through previously, I think.
I think the answer will be closer to our advice than other advice. But, yeah.
Okay, so thanks. That's the Valley Terrace. I'm going to do the heritage one, then have a break, simply because I know the Deputy Mayor wants to do that before he has to get away before 4 o'clock. No, we'll do the heritage. Yes, yeah, don't argue. We're sorting it. Alice, hi. Okay, over to you, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Can I take the report section with regards to the heritage update read, or would you like me to go through that?
If there's anything you specially want to draw us to attention,
I think,
but otherwise, sorry, you go.
Sorry, I think just to note in terms of paragraph 40 to 48 in terms of the types of work that we being the council has been able to support over the last 12 months through the Heritage Fund, and that there's been, in terms of the diversity of, you've got residential properties plus commercial properties plus community properties that have all been able to be supported. Thank you.
Right. Questions, Martin?
I see Gary Council. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
It's more of a question and a statement. I have a statement rather than a question, more or less.
Oh, well, let's... Yeah.
On paragraph 37, you say a total of 639,000 was sought, which way exceeds the $100,000 we had. To what extent do we force people to do stuff?
Through the chair, when you say force...
Okay, so if someone owns a heritage building, a privately owned heritage building, and there's lots of them, do we say to people, if you're going to do some renovations on your place, you've got to maintain the facade, or got to keep the building in the same... And if that adds cost to the owner, they would obviously then possibly have an ability to claim from some of the $100,000, but we were $639,000 applied for. We've only got $100,000, so that person would, and if they weren't one of the people who got money from the $100,000, presumably if they went ahead with their renovation, they would have to also, the stuff that we forced them to do, which is to maintain the facade or whatever it was, they'd have to pay for themselves. Is that right?
Well, technically that's correct. What we do is, if I can walk through the sort of conversation we've been having with people, it's the Heritage Fund is a bonus with regards to, we don't force them to apply, but we're encouraging people to, when they come for a conversation with us, that we look at every... There is a maintenance and a repair level that is just standard. Every building has that. What the conversation we have
every building in the city, or every heritage building?
No, every building. So the Heritage Fund is the...
So we're talking about homes, someone's home?
Someone's home or someone's commercial building. The Heritage Fund, the conversations we're having with potential applicants who have contacted us is the fact that it's the added cost that the heritage aspect has placed onto their building, and it's not the fact that it's listed, it's the fact that it may have ornate plaster, it may have double hung sash windows, and that means that there is more cost to that than a standard brick and tile house, for instance, or a brick and corrugated iron house, or a flat faced commercial building. But
just to stop you, that cost is imposed by us by saying you must retain that. The person might say, no, I don't want that, I've got no interest in that. So we cause the cost.
Technically, yes, in terms of that building is...
Yes, isn't it? When you say technically, what does that mean?
Well, it's listed, but that person will have that cost in any way if they want to maintain that building in that particular form.
Yeah, if they want to, but they may or may not want to, or they may want to but not be able to afford it, and say, okay, I can't do the work, I can't do this really important maintenance work to maintain my house or my commercial building, but I can't do it if I've got to do the additional stuff for the fancy, the heritage component.
which is part of why the Heritage Fund has been
Yep,
but the
point is when, as is quite clearly the fact, we're over $500,000 in over. So $500,000 worth of work was sought, assistance was sought, $639,000 was sought. There was only $100,000 provided, and of which only 88 went. So presumably that a whole lot of that work either didn't happen, and that might be important work for make the house warm or the commercial building earthquake safe or something like that. I've got no idea what it would be. That work didn't happen, or if it did happen, it had to happen with the owner paying for the bits that we forced them to look after because of the heritage.
So in terms of that total amount, of that we have had through this third round, which closed last night, a number of the people who sought funds in the first round have come back and are more properly prepared. Some of the some of the applications that were made last two rounds, their information wasn't adequate enough for us to be able to allocate heritage funding, which is community money, without that robust checking. So what they've done is they had put their work on hold. They have done the required work so that we can robustly report back to the council in terms of our recommendations for allocation. And they've come back this round. Interestingly, it's roughly the same amount of money that's being sought this round for Heritage Fund. So the other way to take that is maybe the Heritage Fund that we've got available, when you take into consideration that heritage is of national importance, is inadequate, not the fact that the heritage is listed.
But Gary, to me, is asking a question. The 529,000 that we couldn't afford, is that work being done? And if it's being done, is that something that's been required of the owner because of its heritage listing, or is it something that's not being done? You know, what's happening there?
And more to the point, to what extent, sorry, thank you, Dave, you're right, but to what extent are people still living in cold buildings, or are people in somewhat unsafe commercial buildings and or residential buildings because they can't afford to do the work, because the work had to have this extra bit put onto it, which was our demand that you maintain whatever heritage characteristics are that we have decided you have to maintain, even though we don't own the building.
So I can't give you a percentage of that, but if I could go back to Councillor McPherson's point, which clearly clarified what Councillor Mallett was saying, the fact is that a majority of those people, the requirements are not forced upon them. They have voluntarily decided that this is time for their buildings to be repaired, or they have seismic requirements that are coming through, and as part of that seismic requirement, because it's got a heritage facade, for instance, it requires certain heritage work to be done as well as the seismic upgrades, and the Heritage Fund is being looked at to support that, in addition to any other funding that the particular building owner can acquire through the lotteries or equip, for instance.
Okay. So are people having to apply for lotteries money to upgrade their houses and things like that because of we've got these heritage conditions attached to their house?
They're public buildings.
Although I guess that's what you just said.
The lotteries is focused more on public community buildings. Large commercial buildings could be looked at as well. So it depends on the criteria and depending on what they're applying for.
Private residents and commercial ones, I don't think are eligible for lottery funding anyway.
There is a difference between the lottery fund eligibility and the equip fund eligibility, which is through the Ministry of Heritage and Culture.
Right.
And the reasons for those funds.
Yeah. So Gary, is that
Yeah, seems quite clear to me.
Martin, thanks.
Yeah, sorry if you'll give me leeway to make a brief statement, because I think this is an important item, and I acknowledge the work of the previous Heritage Panel, and really particularly the work of our staff, but also former Deputy Mayor Gordon Chesterman. I think he showed excellent leadership and expertise. I just give notice, I guess, that I am looking to the Chief Executive and Kelvin or Luke from the planning with your good self, of course, is to bring us back the ideal process by which we advance the cause of heritage moving forward. And I acknowledge that this committee in effect has replaced the panel, but I certainly would see personally as one elected member the role of the urban design panel encompassing a strong heritage component. And it seems to me there's a logic for a revamped urban design panel, independent design panel that actually has heritage, I think, as a component. The only question I would raise then is how we process the one, on the assumption we keep the Heritage Fund going, and I hope we do, how we process those applications. Now, it seems to me, if I can, that the staff in this term of council has done a lot of that work and did it quite well. So my feeling, colleagues, is I do think I would like an item, be it a workshop, Mr. Chief Executive, where we sort of update ourselves with the options and opportunities around the design panel, but also it's important to include independent high-level heritage when needed in that panel process, and obviously work with our very good staff. I don't know if you, Mr. Chief Executive, have a comment. Richard?
So firstly, the Urban Design Panel and the Heritage Panel effectively weren't renewed as part of the governance structure at the beginning of the term. So at this point in time...
so can you speak up a bit, since you're not speaking to the mic?
So the Heritage Panel and the Urban Design Panel weren't continued as part of the governance structure when it was adopted at the beginning of this term. So the question I've got, I suppose, is the... well, actually, no, another statement there. Another part of the resolution for the governance structure was a mid-term review of that, and I know the Mayor's keen to go and have a look at that to make sure, for example, that various aspects are as effective as they can. So I might have to talk to the Mayor about his intent and what he wants to include in that, so I can't really give you an answer at this point in time. I don't want to do anything outside of that mid-term review, which will probably be in the next 6 months. I'd much rather bring it into that and then work with the Mayor about a program to deliver the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's I'm very relaxed about that, obviously, because I mean, obviously, from my perspective, I'm only speaking as an individual member today, not Deputy Mayor. I'm extremely relaxed about our political governance structure. I personally think we've landed things in a good way. That's just my personal view. However, I do think, obviously, I have an ongoing concern around that heritage urban design space, and it's just trying to get how we capture that. And I do feel that there's a role, personally, for a good, high-level, independent expertise, to advise council. Obviously, through the LTP, I'm very keen that we retain, and it's going to be a tough LTP, as we know, that we retain the Heritage Fund, and I think already we've seen some very, very good outcomes from that fund, and obviously assisting people, as you alluded to, Mr. Chair, and yourself, with the things like the lotteries and the work, the other sort of funding that is out there as well. And so I just note that from the CE, and I'm happy with that.
Thanks. Paula.
Thank you. I would like to speak up strongly in support of putting some process around this in the mid-year review. We can't go too long without leaving a void in terms of how we deal with heritage, in my personal opinion. Here we have a city that's growing humongously, and we've only got a limit to the historic heritage of this city. It is what we presently have, and I would feel very sad if we saw further loss of our heritage. I think having a fund to support people doing the right thing, which is often costly to them, is very important. And I also believe that having external stakeholders is also very important, because quite often those are the support groups that are dealing with our heritage issues, and they've got the interface with communities and funders that we don't have. It would be sad if Hamilton lost too much of its history before it's got its act together in terms of how it goes ahead and protects it.
Okay. All right, that'll do for that part of the report. I think, wouldn't mind breaking until 22 for just for a cuppa. So that's about 10 and a half minutes.
10 minutes.
Afternoon tea break, not
10
lunch.
minutes, 30 seconds. 10 minutes, 15.
No, because we don't vote on each individual item. We vote on receiving the overall GM's report, and there's still 2 parts of it to go. Yeah, down the bottom. Paragraph 60 onwards. Well, then we'll vote on the whole thing, Andrew. But if anyone wants to put up individual amendments or motions, we can at that point.
Just receiving the report, isn't it?
I'm hoping. But sometimes people want to move. Councillor James, is that yeah, you are back. Okay, growth indicator, and Luke was going to talk to that, but Greg, sorry, are you talking to the growth indicator thing? That's paragraph 60, page, it's in the GM's report, sorry, 25. And that's all been sent under separate cover or is attached to this, sorry?
It is on page 58 of your agenda.
Okay. Is there anything you want to highlight in that to us?
Yeah, sorry, I'll just correct that. It starts on page 45. So there's two reports this time. We've had a residential indicator report, which is up to its third publication, quarterly, and partly on request of developers and in other parties. This time we've developed a commercial indicator or a business economy indicator report, which deals with retail, commercial, industrial development and indicators across the city. And so for both reports, predominantly we're using the existing data that we have at Council. Council has an enormous amount of data that effectively no one else has. Certainly no one else has in their databases, so we try to use as much of that data as we can to present information and try to make conclusions around how the economy is working, how the business economy and the residential economy are performing. And we also present it as, it also serves as information for those that aren't familiar with Hamilton or that want to become more interested. It tries to be presentable and reasonably simple.
Yeah. Questions of Siggy?
I mean, you've got so much data, like you just said, and I just wonder, have you got data on what's the average income here in Hamilton City?
We do have that data, and there is a section in...
Did I miss it?
One of the reports which talks about, in the housing report, talks about affordability. So MB, the government have come up with a new affordability measure, so that's on page 53 of your report.
Oh, yeah.
And this builds in average incomes, and the measures basically say how many people don't meet an affordability of $662 a week for a single person, which they've deemed to be allows you to live modestly. 662 per week for a single person. So it's surprising, and a reasonably high number of people can't afford to service a mortgage on their current incomes, and rent also is reasonably unaffordable based on that metric.
600 and what, sorry?
So $662 left after paying for mortgage, insurance and rates. So for everything else aside from those three things. And
So,
this is a government number,
yeah,
which we're just quoting directly.
Yep. Gary, thanks. Oh, sorry, hang on. Rob's next, then Gary.
Chair, look, I really appreciate the report. I just wonder if it's possible to get a bit more information in there and whether it can be more up to date. Just before I move on to that, I just, in the migration, I just noticed there's a lack on page 59 in the key findings. You've got there that the population increased by 1,670 migrants during 2016, and just a lack of consistency if you go back to the other report where you've got migration on page 54 at 1,500. And I just wondered if you've used different dates, because the one in the earlier report, in the first report, is up to March 16, and the other one just talks about 2016 being 1,670. So I just wondered if there was a wee bit of a disconnect in terms of the time period there. But is it possible, I mean, migration's important, but what about the population itself? You know, that obviously we do get a certain number of migrants coming here each year, but the population's also increasing if we don't count people coming from Auckland to live in Hamilton as migrants. You know, there's presumably a number over and above that, 1,500 or 1,600 coming to live permanently in Hamilton. Do we, are we able to access that information?
Well, it's limited to the data that these other experts are putting forward. So as far as Statistics New Zealand goes and their migration data, they don't have very good regional migration information. So
that's the word I'm looking for, regional migration.
Yeah, so they don't do it to a level where you could do that reasonably. In fact, I mean, population's really hard to estimate. I mean, you can make annual assessments, but the reality is you only really know at census years, and then then you can interpolate it in between. So you can present. There's a level of false precision, but you can make some of those estimations. But I'd say not as far as migration from Auckland goes. I don't think we just don't have the data.
I used that as an example, but regional migration was what I was looking for. It's just because it's becoming quite important to us to know You know, there are different predictions going on around the city. Has been over the last 12 months about how fast the city's growing. Some say 70 people a week, and then somewhere else you'll read that it's only 30 people per week. But they are pretty important metrics.
They are.
If we can get those right, pretty important metrics to help us as a council plan, you know, what is happening and what the trends are and how long that growth might continue for.
So council's growth projections have got us running at about 2,200 a year increase.
Right.
Our Nydia projections.
Can I challenge that just sort of for the same reason, Rob? Because I saw some figures yesterday saying that we were the second fastest growing region in the country at 2.3%, and we know that Hamilton's growing faster than the average region, and that 2.3% is 3,450 people in a year. So that's sort of the same sort of thing as Robert. It doesn't seem, intuitively, the figures don't seem right in many cases like that.
So the Nydia information has been through the ringer basically, as far as, you know, tested regionally and tested through our experts and, you know, ratified through council even recently. So I'm not sure about the other numbers. I think I've spent too much time of my life looking at population numbers, and I think you have to accept that everyone's guessing, and until you have a census, everyone's guessing. So, you know, there's only so much level of certainty you can get before you're just selecting, you know, one of the guesses. I think we've landed on a pretty a good pragmatic, realistic, and reasonably ambitious growth projection in terms of the Nydia. But I can't say...
The resultant figure, Greg, is... I mean, you're saying 2,000 what's council's using.
Yeah.
If you say 2.3% is the regional average, then you'd be looking at about 4,000 a year for double that as an increase, which then is materially, after a few years, affects your projections and your provision of infrastructure.
I just don't know where that...
2.3%, I'll dig it out for you. It was only yesterday that it came through, and we were second after part of South Auckland.
The other thing, just continuing on with this, the other thing that might be important could be that where you've got on page 59 the population estimate at 2016, which unfortunately is now a year old. If we could have some figures that might have been 12 months and 24 months earlier than that, because that might help us determine a bit of a trend if we took those percentages between 14, 15 and 16, we get a bit of a feel as to what the percentage increase had been over that 12 months. And I've just looked up Wikipedia, and their latest figure is that 161.2 also. So, you know, there appears to be nothing that I suppose is confidently publishable that is less than 12 months old now.
So basically what everyone does is use Stats New Zealand's latest update, which is that. And so if you want to compare yourself to any other city, that's what you do, and that would be 161,200. And then you have more specialist projection series, estimates of population, which, like Nydia, where then you can get, you can start making annual projections. And basically, look, we can have
sorry, would Nydia have figures subsequent to June 16?
Yeah, so we rebased Nydia at that Stats New Zealand, so we can have a consistent base across comparing ourselves to others, and then the June 2017 estimate, based on the Nydia information, is 163,363. 363,
okay. Should we publish those in here? I mean, you know, to me, I mean, this is a great publication, but the figures are already 13 months old. And, you know, like we're trying to plan, so are businesses out there trying to plan too. And, and so the latest, even if it is only an estimate, is perhaps, and if it's to some extent scientifically based, a Nydia being a little more than just an economist prediction, one economist prediction, then we've got something that's perhaps a better planning tool than relying on too older information.
Yeah, so I mean, we can have a population section in the report. I mean, I basically steered away from that because we're looking at housing metrics and a variety of other things. There's no reason why you couldn't have a population, page, and it's relevant as well. So we can put that in. We haven't done that, and so we've just chosen one highlight number for anyone, particularly people out of Hamilton. How many people are there in Hamilton? 161,200 as at June 2016. And then if you do want to go into a section on population and you want to dig into the sort of the murk of what population projections are and show some comparisons and all the rest of it, then absolutely, if that's what you want, then sure, no problem.
Well, we
I
may
think it's
not.
important for
It's
us
not
at the moment.
necessarily what's in that report. It's what we use right through the council and all of our planning, perhaps.
So that's So in terms of our regulatory internal population growth projections that Chris's team uses for their Three Waters and the DC policy uses for its growth projections, etc. That's a more regulatory technical kind of thing, which again we can that is really important. And this is different though from my perspective, because this is a publication to hand out to people who aren't necessarily interested in all of that regulatory stuff.
Yeah, but some of them are relying on the figure. Some of the planning, I mean, we're having that discussion at the DHB right at this moment. They've been using outdated figures too, and for their planning, it's I won't go into their woes, but they're also got different figures again and lower. And one of the things that concerns me about this population figure, you say it's a Stats New Zealand one. I've looked up the subnational population estimates on the weekend, and that's what it is for that period. But we know that in 2013, after we got the census figures in, our population had grown considerably faster than the previous lot of subnational population estimates. So we're now relying again on 4-year-old Stats New Zealand figures, which last time were wrong, and we know we're growing faster than anticipated. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're up near 170,000 in reality. And we can't. There doesn't seem to be a good way of testing that. I thought if you're just basing NIDIA, the university figures, on Stats New Zealand base, then I think I bet we've got problems in being accurate. No, I mean, can't solve that here, but I think Rob's points and that have highlighted.
Other councils and regions must be experiencing, and other DHBs must be experiencing exactly the same, whether it's growth or decline, must be, and it's an important statistic in terms of a planning tool for all of those regions. So I just wonder whether there needs to be some pressure going on to get more up-to-date stats.
So just to be clear, Council doesn't use out-to-date stats. What we've done is for this out-facing publication is chosen a stat that's a point in time that other people consistently use. But as far as planning, we don't use Stats New Zealand, we use NIDIA, and that's where the rigour is in terms of our area. So this report doesn't reflect the amount of technical rigour that's gone into Council's growth projections. This is simply a statement of Stats New Zealand fact as at their last projection.
But we call this a growth indicator report. I think if I was a business, if I was representing a business wanting to start up in Hamilton, this would be one of the first. This would be one of the first books I'd grab to sort of get a little bit of a feel as to what's happening. And I appreciate that you didn't have to deep dive down to get and absolutely no doubt that the dates are in here that reflect that.
So, Councillor Pascoe, you're right, it is a growth indicator report, but it's focused on housing growth and economic growth. The figures that you're referring to, as Greg has indicated, are a highlight figure based on population at a point in time, based in 2016. But I think
based on Stats New Zealand,
based on Stats New Zealand,
proved wrong in the past.
But it's one figure of which the whole point of those reports are meant to be indicators of economic activity, either through housing or through business land activity, rather than
so
population.
It has got business land in there too.
That's correct. So I think the takeaway for us though is that with regard to population, that we'll have a look at those and
and see how else we can present more up-to-date or at least revised estimates of what the population might be at this point in time as opposed to 2016.
Yeah, look, I'm not being critical of the book. I think the publication's first class. Yeah. It's just really a matter of seeing where we can retune it a bit to make it perhaps a little more useful as that planning tool too. But thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. On page 48 and page 49, there's graphs, bar graphs, and it strikes me there's a little bit of an anomaly, but you can probably explain it to me. If you look at the one on the top of page 48, new residential dwellings consented 2005 to June 2017, then go across to the top of 49, you'll see, you'll see that there's 800, on 48, you'll see in 2005 there was 881 new residential dwellings consented 2005 to June 2007, in June 2005. If you go to 2005 on the page 49, you'll see that there's a whole lot more entitled residential sections, titled residential freehold sections in unit titles. Okay, what started me off? What started me off was I just noticed that we're actually, so on that one on page 49, I just noticed that we still aren't titling residential freehold sections and unit titles. In 2016, we did less than we did in 2005. So I thought that sounds funny because I thought we had historic growth and things like that. Now, I'm not 100% sure of the difference between residential freehold sections, but then you look over on page 48 at the residential dwellings consented, the 2005 is way below the 2016 figure. I would have thought those things would have gone like that.
So they should shape about the same, and there's a lag between when something's titled and when a dwelling's consented. Yeah. And there's also, movement within them in terms of, the number of dwellings on a unit title or changes to consents, etc. Okay. So I think the shape is pretty consistent.
I guess what that led me think, one of them is about land, one of them is a land use thing, eh? Is that is a titled residential freehold sections and blah, blah, blah. What's that? What does that, just break that down to me to what that means?
So a residential freehold section is like one section in a green field, just a new section, and a unit title is, something like an apartment would have 12 unit titles on one lot.
So I got that. So that is about developer-ready land, is it?
It's related to
units. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of a proxy for that. Whereas the other one on 48 is actually consented dwellings.
That's right.
So that's dwellings or houses or whatever you want to call them, Hueys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very similar.
So what does it tell us that in 2000, maybe it's just a timing thing and I'm making too much of it, but in 2005 for both of those, if you look at the dwellings, 2005 there was 881. 2005, and if you look at the residential freehold sections, there was 1,286, I think it is. It's a little small figure. So the titled sections was much greater than the dwellings. In 2016, the dwellings have gone up significantly, but the sections haven't gone. In fact, the sections are below what they were in 2005.
So what it probably means is that people land banked after the GFC, or they weren't able to move their sections. So you can see there's a lot of titled sections created prior to the GFC, and then
yes. So this is So this is the page 49 thing, eh? Yeah.
Yeah, and so on page 48, so the actual dwellings consented picked up quicker as economic activity picked up, but there's probably a lag there because of the land banking, because of the land that hadn't been developed. And now you see the sections and the new dwellings at 10-year plus highs. The demand's caught up.
So which one reflects developer confidence more? the residential freehold, the sections one? Or is that a impossible question?
I don't know.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what, because it seemed to, I would have, like I said, I would have thought those things would have gone together.
Yeah.
And there seems to be an anomaly. I mean, and I'm wondering, does that mean something? Does it mean people are losing confidence, or our district plan was too rough, or banks weren't lending money, or I don't know what would cause?
Well, they're all. Yeah, there's lots of things wrapped up. I just think that consented dwellings is more of an immediate representation of demand. So if I'm getting a building consent and I'm going to spend $300,000 to build a house, then that's probably more immediate than seeking subdivision, and that would, you know, indicate my future investment. It doesn't necessarily compel me to it. Yeah.
Just sorry, it's a bit hard to read the number on this one, but on the actual printed one. So 6 months into this year, which I suppose, do we start by the Senate? We must start it from January. Is it a January year, is it?
Yeah, it's calendar, that's right.
Okay, calendar years, okay. It's 532, so freehold sections and unit titles is 532. So if you just annualise that, that's 1,064. Is that right? Which is a sizable drop from last year.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a seasonal? I mean, do we expect it to pick up in the next year, or is there a reason why we're, you know, because we're doing special housing accords, and I know those won't be reflected in here, but you know, we are trying. My understanding is we're trying really hard to, you know, create more developer-ready sections. And perhaps it isn't flowing through, and it might be land. I don't understand why. What's causing that? Do you know? Or Luke, do you know? Have you an idea?
Sorry,
I can see you quivering over there.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for throwing to me. Look, I suppose the other thing, look, there are a range of factors, and we can't give you a definitive answer around whether or not that figure's going to.
Sorry. The Mayor was whispering in my ears.
That's okay.
Important stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Look, I suppose the short answer is we don't know definitively whether or not that number of the combined freehold and unit sections, which is currently sitting at June at 532, whether or not that's going to just magically double, or whether it's going to go above that, because there's a lot of things that affect, you know, the performance of those numbers.
Okay.
And we just don't have we can't point to one definitive causation as to what's driving that. But what you can see is...
Can you bullet point a couple of the things that might, like bank funding would be one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Banks being, and my understanding is, I think a few of us had a talk to the bank 3 or 4 months ago, or 2 or 3 months ago, and I think it was ASB, one of them anyway. I think it might have been the bank that had a record year, whichever one.
Yeah, I think. Look, absolutely, bank funding.
So banks are getting skitterish, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the credit ability for some developers is getting much harder. LVR restrictions around for people making purchases. The actual intentions of the landowners themselves and what they want to do in terms of letting supply onto the market, uncertainty leading up into the election. There's always a slowdown around activity because people aren't really sure what the outcome might be of the next central government election. So all of those things are relevant factors that affect the rate at which land is being developed.
Thank you. I guess I'm trying to use this as a crystal ball, and maybe it's the wrong thing, you know. And I just know what happened to the council 8 years ago or something. They were, you know, things were just really humming, and then all of a sudden crash. And that council had spent money and was doing what probably what we're trying to do now to grow growth and sticking our heads out a bit and taking on big spending obligations and whatnot, on the assumption that the growth is going to keep going. And I don't know how valid it is to, and it isn't valid to, from one data point, to think that we're tipping over the edge. But I just want to understand what these things mean, I guess.
Yeah, look, I think that the indicators are certainly that our consent numbers are still solid. You know, the number of consents we're getting, both for resource consents and for building consents. The fact that we've got very significant landowners interested in special housing areas. We've got significant landowners who are looking to do private plan changes. we know the government's obviously very concerned about ensuring there's enough supply, which is why we've been considered for the Housing Infrastructure Fund. So from my perspective, all of those things indicate that, yeah, there might be a slowdown to some extent, but I think everything's pointing towards continued activity, you know, barring any external financial shock like what we saw in 2008 with Lehman Brothers, and no one saw that coming. You know, and we're certainly not aware of any existential external threat of that magnitude. But all the indicators that we see, all the conversations that we have with people who are looking to invest, indicate that there's still a strong intentions to keep investing.
And just on the way to work this morning, I was listening to the national radio, and they were talking about special housing calls, specifically in Auckland, and there was some conjecture or narrative that guys, and I'll get my wording wrong here, but developers or someone are applying for special housing accords, they're not delivering anywhere near the number of houses they said they would, or they haven't even done the development at all.
Yep.
So, and I know we haven't, and I could be wrong, we haven't done any special housing accords.
No,
we've just prepared the way for that.
We've all we've done at this point is sign the accord, sign a housing accord between Mayor King and the Minister, which has been ratified by Council. You've agreed to consult on a draft policy. There's hearings on that policy happening this Thursday that Councillor O'Leary will be chairing, and then we'll be bringing a report back to you for consideration on the final version of the policy for you guys to either accept, amend, or reject on the 24th of August. But you're right, the special housing areas in Auckland have not yielded anywhere near the number of dwellings that were envisaged through the various consents that have been issued.
And this will be a hard
Sorry, Gary, don't particularly want to interrupt. It's an interesting discussion, but I think we're going way past what was intended for this particular GM's report, and I'm wondering, I'll ask the Chief Executive maybe to set up a briefing session where we can actually get our teeth around into this whole area, because I think it's clearly important and something of interest. I'm just wondering if we can restrict it just to the report and to the two attached reports.
Can it be acknowledged that I barely mentioned the district plan in that discourse then?
Well, that was going to be your second line of questions. That's why I'm
very happy to acknowledge your abstaining from that particular point of debate. Thank you.
Don't worry, it's coming.
I'm sure it is.
I can see. Paula, have you got some questions rather than on this wide area of discussion on the particular reports?
No, I'm looking forward to the wider discussion because I think what Gary's raising are some valid points for discussion. No, just a couple of quickies. On page 49, the new completed dwellings, the lag time back then was 11 months. On average, it took 11 months to complete a residential dwelling, but the lag time was from 5 to 24 months, so we're still talking about that. And I'm just wondering, has that shifted since this was... Are we getting more cut through and completion, or is it all subject to those factors that Gary was outlining before?
So that's the latest summary information from Andy Zhao, who has his hands on the data.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the most accurate data at the moment.
So just in respect to that, when we go forward and do that wider thinking, we're going to have to consider, are we not, when we start to get the yields from development, because we're going to take on a sizable loan, put it up front, and then it's going to take some time to pay back. And so if there are lag times for good reasons, we're going to need to understand how that impacts the return. I just want to flag that as something to think about in that wider debate. On page 51, around the median price per suburb, it was just interesting. I see the newer subdivisions, of course, Sylvester. I always forget what that one's called, but Sylvester is in the higher price bracket. And I was just wondering what colour zone we would expect Peacocks, the new area of Peacocks, to turn up at. It would be in that higher end housing mostly, or what?
I'd expect so.
So it'd be another high cost area to live in. That would just inform our debate going forward. In Hamilton Central, it's in the green zone. It's a little bit tricky with the colour of this key to kind of figure out whether it's light green, medium green, or whatever. It looks like a medium kind of green in here. what difference to the median price would you expect infill to make? Because you're going to get better quality apartments, better quality townhouses in town. It's going to lift the median, right? You would expect, if things were successful with our policies, that that would become slightly bigger.
Yeah, so new infill dwellings of better quality than existing or older, probably worth more. Part of the reason that the areas that you see are green, they're dragged down to some extent by older housing stock and simply the volume of existing older housing stock. So that's why Peacocks and Newstead or Ruakura are the red shade, largely because the number of new houses there is small. So you have, a number of them have a higher value. They're not drowned out by a whole lot of existing lower value dwellings.
Yeah. So just trying to put my head around those factors, because that's going to make a difference to how we meet the demand for affordable housing, not just demand for numbers of houses.
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't it? We're going to have to, where are the people who are entry level going to get into a house? Page 52, the potential slowdown in the market. Like most people in Hamilton, I have some friends who are real estate agents. Oh, some. And so I've had a few chats, as you do, by the by, and a number of them have indicated a significant slowdown. There's actually, some of them are losing some of their real estate brokers because of the slowdown. What do we know about where that's likely to go going forward, or do we not?
So I can't predict the housing market.
No, exactly.
On page 50, just a couple of pages back, you can see the shape of the house price change. So Hamilton's the green, and it follows a similar trend. But you can see there's an unprecedented, 30%, annual increase we reached about a year ago, and so that's recorrected, and I think that probably explains the quite stark reversal in the two heat maps on page 52 in terms of volume. So, it looks pretty volatile. So you can probably expect reasonably, volatile corrections and recorrections. But again, that's just looking at the trends, not knowing a great deal more than that. But we are coming off a historic and rather unusual, peak in property price escalations. So they might just have priced people out or pushed people out of interest in buying, which then has pushed the volumes down. Or
people might be staying put, not being able to go to that next level.
Yeah,
that's what I heard, is that the people were holding on to their houses, in some cases doing a renovation because it was cheaper than trying to get up into the next notch of housing. But one other final thing, I have harked on about it before, but in this, where would we see reflected the ability of the building and construction sector to deliver on? I mean, there might be sections, there might be plans for houses, they might have actually sold the title, but if there isn't a builder free, because I'm hearing anecdotally, but I wonder where it would sit in here, that people can't get hold of a builder, they're having to wait for their property to start to be built, because there are not enough trained builders, and those who are really busy are not taking on apprentices at the moment because they're too busy trying to keep their staff going. And
there are, I think there are pressures there. There's a housing cost construction index which reflects some of that, which we've had a look at. There's other studies going on, because that is a problem and people know that could be a constraint on growth and development. We don't have it specifically, and I think there's some comments. I think it's just referred to as, at the moment, it's on the horizon, it's a concern, or it could be a constraint, and if growth continues to happen and there are problems in the construction industry, then that could be something that pulls it back. I don't know.
So I guess my question is, it's fair enough for this council to take time to understand those factors, the factors that might hold up construction, the factors that might hold up titles, all of those things.
Yeah, but that's what we're going to look at when we have the more in-depth look rather than here today.
Absolutely. So that's why I would like to make sure that we do include that factor, if we could. Those two factors, the real estate market and the construction
Chris
ability.
And Luke have been noting it all down.
I'm sure he is. Thank you.
Andrew, thanks.
We don't have to, but principally
I thought
for
we agreed with your
distribution.
department in the last few months that you wouldn't do it again.
So I haven't
I'll
been
answer.
directed not to.
Mayor King, that's not something that I'm personally aware of, but the reason why we print them out is they are very popular outside in the community, both in the development sector and some of the other people we liaise with in terms of our key stakeholders. When we go to developer forums where we do regular engagement events to talk about council business and other initiatives that are going on, that they're highly sought after publication. So we only print them every quarter. It's not an expensive cost to the organisation. But if council doesn't want us to print them, we won't print them anymore. But the feedback we get from the people who receive those reports is very positive, and we're consistently told that they're very valuable documents. But if there's a desire from the council not to print those and make them available, we can certainly action that.
I mean, they're beautiful glossy pamphlets, but we live in a modern world where we all work on our laptops and especially the people who are into these kind of figures. And this doesn't sell the council another unit. There's no profit in the council for this. This is information that's valuable to third parties, and they'll go online to find it. And if a little old lady, excuse me, take those words back, if somebody wants one who hasn't got a smart phone or a laptop, we will print one for them as a one-off, put a staple in the top left corner and give it to them. So I'm just wondering why we keep churning out pamphlets with mistakes in them sometimes that they all have to be canned in the bin and we start again over and over. And there's mistakes in this one.
Yeah, we've picked up a couple of typos. I think the short answer is no, we don't have to print them. And I think those are probably all the benefits. That's why we print them. But again, I'm not sort of.
Yeah, so if there's a desire from the elected members for us not to print them, we won't print them.
Yeah. I don't think this committee is the place to actually decide whether they should be printed or not, but it is a question that staff should be asked to address. We don't know what the costs are, Andrew. We can't tell them not to do it here from, they're not prepared for that. I think that would be unfair, but I think they should give us some information about to show they've considered that, and that can come maybe not in the committee meeting.
I'm happy to make those costs available post this meeting, and I'm happy to send an email around to elected members for information.
But it's not just your department; it's every department in the building. So it's pamphlets on pamphlets on pamphlets, churning out every 6 months. Some of them, the whole lot, go in the bin because of the mistakes, and we reprint. It's just not the modern world we live in. We talk about the Paris Accord and being careful and looking after inks and new paper. It's not recycled paper. And we just still carry on as if the world's going to go on forever.
So, Your Worship, I'll put that as an issue to raise with SLT because it's a bit more cross-organisational. So I'll pick that up initial and take it as an issue and take it through to SLT.
Okay, it's the second time it's come up in the last few months. So, and I got assured last time that it wouldn't happen again. Yeah. And I see these are still hot from the printer.
The first time was on
the social wellbeing.
Still warm to touch.
The first one was social wellbeing?
Well, they're everywhere. They're through the whole building. They turn up on my desk on a weekly basis.
Without them, what would we put on our coffee tables?
Yep. I've noted that and I'll take that forward.
Thank you.
Thanks. It is really useful information. The reason we've got all these questions is because people are interested in it. So thanks for doing that. It's well worth it, and I know people follow it out in the community. Andrew's question how we physically give it to them. And we're going to, if we have a decent discussion around these topics that have been raised, I think coming up in a briefing soon, we'll need that really in front of the LTP discussions. Yeah, they're going to inform things like peacocks, how we pitch our infrastructure proposals and things like that.
No, totally get printing it out.
Yep.
It's required if somebody needs it.
Yep. Well, in actual fact, most people could print it themselves from a good copy electronic copy sent to them, I would say. But this isn't the place, I don't think, to discuss that, to be honest. So the last part of this, and I can get back to the local alcohol policy, which is just underneath that. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to find what page that's on now. It's the last, page 25. And who's dealing with that? Ricky. So I'm just trying to find you go anyway, Ricky. while I find my page.
It's pretty self-explanatory. There was a request at the 20th of June to bring back some information about some on-licences and the on-licence and off-licences that were approved in the last 3.5 years. And that's attachment 4, which starts on page 43 and goes through to page 44. And on page 44, there's a summary in terms of the amount of on-licences and off-licences that were approved over that period. If you...
Thanks. And from memory, the reason we want this, we want to see what damage, inverted commas, had been done in the period between when we agreed to have the policy and adopted it to be sent off to the court, and for them to be stuffing around for nearly 2 years by the time we hear it. So what's happening with the hearing date? Is there any update on that, Ricky?
In terms of the hearing date, nothing has changed since the last meeting. So the indicative date is still December, the first week of December this year. And so in terms of our exchange of evidence timetable is working towards that indicative date of December.
Right. And the CEO is going to check about the letter being posted complaining about the procedural delays.
Yeah, that's correct, and I'll follow it up with the Chief Executive as well.
Thanks, that'll be great, because some of us feel if we send that in, it might give them a bit of unofficial hurry up. They might find some gaps. I hear there could be one in early November, a month earlier.
Yeah, I can follow that up as well, yeah, no problem.
Maybe just send us any information through the Chief Executive's update or whatever's easiest. Right. Any other questions on that? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Ange.
No, that's okay. So I was surprised by this though. So there's actually only one off-licence bottle shop that's opened in that 3.5-year period.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's
based
new.
on
Yeah, everyone else has just renewed their licences. So it was surprising. I was surprised by that. Certainly feels like they're opening every other day.
Maybe we've put them off just by talking about
Maybe
it publicly.
we have.
Yep. Okay, so that's the whole report. The resolution is just that we, from memory, that we adopt we receive the report. Is that right, Chris? Yep. So that's on page 21. Yep. I'll move that. Seconded by James. No discussion. All those in favour, raise their hands. Against? Carried unanimously. Thanks. Okay. We're on to item 14, which is Alice doing? Yeah, you are here. I didn't see you behind the chair. Alice and Luke are doing that. And this is just the information about Temple View, growth cell, and also what we call WA along Wallace Road, beside Temple View there, on page 174. Alice, is there maybe just highlights if there's anything you want to draw to our attention, then questions?
Certainly.
The maps, councillors, are on page 160, is it? 130, I'm trying to...
183.
183. Yep. Sorry, Alice.
That's right. So attachment 1, map B, which is on page 184, shows the extent of the Temple View area that is part of the overall area that this report relates to. And then if you're looking at that map, there is a mustardy colour up at the top right-hand area of that diagram, and that is the area known as WA, which is located in the Waikato district. And that area is also identified in the 2005 strategic agreement between Hamilton and Waikato to come into the city at a future time. Then if you look down through to the blue hatched area, which is the former college and Temple, within the settlement of Temple View, that large green area to the right-hand side is the area of approximately 14 hectares that came into the city in 2014. That is also the area that a future plan change that has already come to the council is for preparation will occur later on this year, which is a requirement under the Resource Management Act. Once a piece of land is brought into the city, that piece of land will then be afforded the appropriate zoning provisions under the new jurisdictions district plan requirements.
Sorry, what does that mean in practice, the end result of that, the plan for the green, the zone for the green area?
So presently the green area is zoned rural under the Waipa.
Yep.
And the plan change process will then zone it to reflect the zoning under the Hamilton City District Plan.
Which will be likely...
So staff to date have done consultation and option analysis, and the work that's being shared with the community to date is that it would be of similar zoning, if not similar zoning to that of the Temple View zoning that's there presently over the former college area and the temple.
Even though it's down on the flat and in the peat area as opposed to the temple parts which are on the slope.
That's right. So that analysis is still being worked through, of course, but the zoning doesn't prohibit, sorry, let me rephrase that. The proposed zoning would still require it's intended would require resource consent. So those areas that may prohibit development because of peat would then be addressed through a specific resource consent process.
Okay. All right, and Chris's property is on the point of that darker mustardy orange there, right down the bottom point of that, so in case anyone wanted to know. Hey, Chris.
Yep, I have a declared conflict if there's any discussion about WA.
Okay, questions on this area on the floor? Are there any?
Yeah, I've just got one.
Rob.
One quick question. You state in, let me just find it, the very last paragraph of your report, 73, that you've had no formal discussions with the landowners in WA. I assume WA by map is that one on 187, is it? Which is the sort of purpley area of Wallace Road. Is it Wallace Road and
Yes, that's correct.
Yep, so there's actually a visual map on page 187?
That's right, attachment.
Yep, okay. Are there quite a number of landowners in that particular area?
I think there are 9.
Probably less than 10.
Less than 10. So they're all farming, all economic farming units, are they?
I wouldn't say economic. There is probably a mix. We haven't, done a great analysis
a deep dive down into that one.
No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's all. That's the only questions I had. Thank you.
93B is just a house.
That's mine.
So I specifically do outline how many residents there are or properties in that area. I will just need to locate that in my report. That's all.
But you can count them basically on that same map, can't you?
Yes, you can. Yes.
It's not that many.
Commissioner.
If you've got 2 hands, you should manage it.
And it's both sides of Wallace. It's both sides of Wallace Road.
No, it's the city side. That's correct.
So Wallace Road would remain the boundary in WA.
Well, the position of that boundary would have to be negotiated at the time between the two councils in terms of whether or not it's on one side or the other. But the information in the 2005 agreement just identifies the road as the boundary line.
Okay. Is there sense in seeking the other side of Wallace Road at the same time, given that Wallace Road would probably be retained as a main street access?
Well, I can't actually answer that because no analysis has been done on that. I'm sorry.
From my perspective, we have a mixture around the city where we have the boundary down the centre line and parts of K Road, and it's to one side and other parts of K Road. In my perspective, it's better to have the road in one jurisdiction entirely and not down the centre line. It does create jurisdictional problems.
It's just that K Road will only be the middle of K Road will only be a boundary for a certain period. It's reasonable to assume that in time the other side of K Road will become part of the city.
Whereas
anyway.
that's not the case with
this. This may not be the case in Wallace Road, but it may make sense. I'm thinking here from a subdivisional point of view that if Wallace Road was one of the main feeder roads into WA, that we sought to negotiate the land on both sides of the road as coming into the city. But that was just a thought I had.
Look, I agree with that. Things like jurisdiction for speed limit changes, it's easier if you've got one jurisdiction. If you've got a split jurisdiction, that's hard. So it does make sense, I think, if it's coming to the city, to be in the city, the road, and then you've got control over what happens on the road.
Okay. It was just a thought, that's all.
Andrew.
I have an interest in a piece of land in this area, and I'm not conflicted by this report. We're only receiving a report, but I just want to put it on record that I do have an interest in land in this area. Thank you.
So we could note that. Thanks. Siggy.
A question. Thank you for the report. So all the stuff that Temporary has been building for the last few years, we didn't have to pay for any of it, like the water, like all the water areas that they built and everything? Was it all?
You mean the Legacy Park? Yes, they have built and paid for that themselves.
That's amazing. It's pretty awesome. If you ever go out there, it's amazing to walk around. So, just saying. Thank you.
Alice, is it correct that we've more or less said there can be no more subdivisions or at least buildings, new residential lots in Templeview Village itself because of the access for stormwater and the stormwater and provisions and things like that? Certainly that was the case a few years ago. I actually discussed that with you once, Chris.
It's probably wastewater is more...
Well, one of the waters, 3 waters, I couldn't remember which one.
Wastewater is pretty challenging out there. I'm not sure to the answer to that question, though.
So there's no prohibition. There's no prohibition. Thank you, on development out there. But every case would be looked at, I would think, in terms of the capacity at that time. Because
there was a subdivision built in the Deseret Road area on the west side of Deseret Road, and with I don't know 8 or 10 there. But there's been nothing since then. That was about 6 years ago. But some people have been turned down with subdivision applications to split their sections and things.
Well, I think if my memory serves me correctly, most of that land that was subdivided is larger lots, and that's now zoned future urban, so it's different to the actual settlement area, which is identified as the white area on attachment 1. And their serviceability would be looked at. But in terms of specifics, I can't answer that, I'm sorry.
In terms of a structure plan for this, was there a timeline for that? I know we haven't got one at the moment, and no real development could happen, I'm presuming, unless there was a structure plan.
Well, a structure plan allows council to set the scene, and it's a cohesive and understood development approach. No, there is no structure plan process in place. There is the structure plan concept that has been raised, and a scoping study done as a result of the proposed district plan review and the outcomes of appeals. That scoping study was presented to council earlier this year. but there is the actual funding for the structure plan would be an issue for the long-term plan process.
Is there a call from the residents or owners out there for a structure plan to be done so that subdivision can start, or is I'm trying to find out whether we'll need to do something like that in the LTP?
I think there is a clear direction from the owners, particularly they submitted and then appealed the district plan review process in terms of the proposed district plan, seeking a structure plan for the entirety of the Templeview area. And we have fielded conversations with other landowners out there, particularly when we've been out talking about the plan change to facilitate the zoning for that 14 hectares.
Okay, so does anyone know if that's on the list for discussion in the LTP with some, enough information for us to make a decision whether we put the money aside for that in some of the later years or whichever year?
I would have to check with the likes of Luke on that, but the understanding is that that could be an issue for the LTP, but I can't help you further.
Yeah, we just need to make sure it's not lost, I guess.
I think the scoping study was a very good piece of work by Luke and contributed from us as infrastructure in terms of what it would take to do a structure plan. So there's quite a big price tag to do the structure plan, but the information's all there, so I imagine it is a valid discussion for council to have whether they want to do the structure plan or not.
Yeah, well that's all, so it's on the agenda for us to consider is what we need to check.
Yep, I'll take that.
Thanks. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Gary. Before you start, I just need to move a motion that we'll extend the meeting by half an hour. Moved by Gary, seconded by me. Those in favour, against, carried. Done. Questions?
I was wanting to debate that.
Tough.
So you've covered just about everything. So you've just asked Chris to prepare for us for the 10-year plan, the cost of doing the structure plan. The structure plan is not the work, it's the how much. So it might be 10, 50, I don't know, $100,000 to do all the scoping and the planning things out, but it's not building anything.
No, nothing to do with that.
So we've done all of the work to understand what it would cost to do a structure plan.
So you do know that?
We've done that already.
Okay.
That was the intent of the scoping.
So it's just a matter of you pulling that together on one page and saying, putting that into this.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And timing, obviously.
And would the structure plan include estimates of what the infrastructure costs would be if we wanted to do some?
It doesn't at the moment.
Sorry?
It doesn't at the moment.
So you've got it already. You've got something already.
No. So the structure plan. So the scoping report has set out the gap analysis of the information that we have in house and the information.
Gap analysis meaning this is what we need, but
this
it's
is
not
what we would need to be able to prepare a structure plan. And then to prepare a structure plan, we would have to fill in those gaps and then consult with the landowners and the community and understand what their desires would be for that area and understand the environmental and infrastructure constraints, then to be able to facilitate the whatever could be developed out there and the extent to that. So at the moment that's an unknown, it's future urban. But a structure plan would then be able to put an overlay like Peacocks, like Rotokauri, like Rototuna, Ruakura. So, and it would be customised, I would assume, for the Templeview environment. But all that has to be debated and worked through in terms of the funding that council wishes to put aside for it.
So I just want to be clear, we're talking about the money to do a document, and that document will tell us you need to spend $100 million for this sewage system or $20 million for this.
That's correct.
And it'll be in these areas.
Yeah.
So the other point to that is that the document of a structure plan would then also, in addition to understanding the infrastructure, to anchor that would require a plan change to anchor it into the plan to make it so those sorts of costs would possibly be indicated as well through your long-term.
Although the district plan has to be updated within the LTP period anyway, doesn't it?
well, in terms of the 10-year, but in terms of this, I was just thinking of this process, how much it would cost for a particular plan change.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, wouldn't it make sense to, if you were having to update the district plan anyway, make sure you do the Templeview structure plan within that same exercise?
So I think it would depend on your timing in terms of when you've done your structure plan to what council's desires are in terms of looking at another district plan review in terms of a full district plan review or specific reviews of specific areas. No, I'm talking about, we have to do a district plan review, a full one, within aren't they maximum 10 years apart? You have to look at your whole plan at the 10-year period of once it's operative, but that doesn't, if you have been looking at your plan and keeping it up to date, that doesn't mean you have to do a wholesale review, but you have to actually have looked and been able to say that you're comfortable with where everything is at. Yeah, I'm not trying to get into a discussion on a 10-year plan, but don't worry about it, I'll bring it up later somewhere else. Is there any other questions on, Gary, have you finished?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, thanks. So we will get a report back at some stage during the LTP process.
Yeah, I'll find out when or if or when there's going to be a discussion on Templeview.
And will that include WA?
Yes.
Yeah, so it'll be Templeview / WA. Okay, thanks. So I'll move the resolution, which I imagine when I come to it, is to receive the report. Gary will second it, or Rob will, sorry. Any discussion? No. Those in favour, raise their hands. Against, carried. Thanks, it was unanimous. Great show of enthusiasm there from all the councillors. Now, Blair's just come back in, so we saved item 9 for him. The draft submission to the draft future-proof strategy, phase 1, May 2017. Lots of... I think it's still on the coffee table out there. Blair. Sorry, that's page 71, everyone.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. Look, I'll keep this brief. This is the future-proof growth strategy for Waikato, Waipa, Hamilton areas. It's a partnership agreement with ourselves, those councils, Regional Council, NZTA and iwi. The strategy has been in place since 2009. This is the first fundamental review since that time. It's a 2-stage review process. This is the first stage of the review, and this is our submission to the draft strategy. We are represented by Councillor Dave and Mayor Andrew on the joint committee. All of the suggestions, input, comments that Hamilton has sought to date has been reflected in the draft strategy in terms of the documents that have been produced, and so this submission is supportive of the draft strategy content. However, the submission breaks into 3 parts, items of support that we wish to retain, those where we see some minor tweaks, and I guess the last portion, which is how we may wish to see the document written in a more plain English form to make it easier to engage with in terms of the read of the document. And so in the submission where I use the word improve readability, I would propose to change that to written in plain English. So I'll just amend my wording to make that clearer. But nonetheless, this submission is a supportive submission in terms of the strategy. So, Chair Dave, I think I'll just leave my comments there and happy to take any questions.
Thanks. I've got Jeff, then Siggy to start. Jeff,
thank you, Dave. Blair, back in March 28th, we had a report come to us, G&I, Future-Proof Update, which was related to providing feedback on the draft updated strategy. And there was a bit in there about Tamahiri, and in particular our position on Tamahiri and when it should come into the city, etc. And I think we questioned, well, I know we questioned that at the time, and the report there suggested that staff recommend that Tamihere remain in the Waikato district unless there was community of interest to and I think we changed that. Yeah. And I'm just wondering, is that reflected anywhere in this, or had it already been incorporated into feedback? Or
it had been incorporated into feedback. This submission just asked that the Tamihere area be hatched in terms of a different colour on one of the maps in the document.
Yeah.
So there's already actions within the strategy that talk about the HT1, the R2, the Tamihere and the Southern Links land all being looked at as areas to come into the city or enter into agreements. I'll just find you the specific page reference where we talk about the land area. Sorry, it's the last item on page 78. So it's the map, very last item, map, future-proof settlement pattern. It talks about the map there and just wanting the Tamihere and the Southern Links area to be hatched a different colour. So the rest of that intention is already included in the document.
Okay, so that was consistent with what we talked about at the meeting. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Siggy.
Look, thank you for that report, Blair. It's very applaudable that you want to have it written in plain English. I just wondered, is that possible?
Look, no, I think... Sorry. There's a question that the Mayor and Councillor McPherson have challenged me on, and I've certainly, you'll see in the submission, page 76, section A, that specifically, that section's referring to that part. Yes, I believe there are opportunities for that.
I look forward to it. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, Rob, thanks.
Thanks, Leah. Thanks for the report. Phase 2, which you mentioned in paragraph 8.
Yes.
I may be reading this wrong, but has it taken us 8 years to get to phase phase 1, has it? No, okay.
No.
So is there a timeline now for phase 2, given that you've got quite a number of pretty important bullet points there, which I know regularly take fire and comments, or comments from other councillors, and certainly a fair amount of fire from Deputy Mayor Gallagher, who isn't here at the moment, on some of those particular issues. So I'm keen to know how quickly phase 2 might roll out.
So we're requesting within our submission, paragraph 2.2.2 of the letter on page 74, that a detailed project plan is developed for phase 2 and that we want it to be completed by the end of 2018. So that aligns with our long-term plan process, with the national policy statement work, and all those things then culminating through to recommendations to the regional policy statement. So we're very clear we want it done by end of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just raise that point about that date? I hadn't picked the end of 2018 because I believe that if we're, as you look just above that, we're looking at the implications of the Housing Infrastructure Fund and special housing areas for that matter, but HIF mainly, we need to have made our decisions about expenditure, investment in the Peacock area within the LTP round, so i.e. by 30th of June next year. So I reckon to bring them into, that future-proof should be in sync with that, and it should reflect the regional agreement on settlement patterns also by 30th of June next year rather than the end of next year. I don't know whether... it seems to me a potential problem if it's not. We're putting in stuff to NZTA, it's part of HIF, these are the roads we want to serve this purpose, and they say, well, where's it in future-proof? And we say, we're working on it for another 6 months.
Yeah, look, I think, Dave, I agree with what you're saying. I think we can pick up that sentiment of ours through the joint committee discussions on the specific, when we see the project plan. That end of 2018 refers to not only future-proof being updated, but then, of course, the input through to the regional policy statement in terms of any outcomes from the national policy statement work and the future-proof update. So it's more than just future-proof.
Yep.
So I'm absolutely clear that future-proof needs to be in alignment with our long-term plan, our HIF decisions and other bits and pieces, which our time frame is June next year for those all being finalised, and we cannot be inconsistent. I completely agree. So I think our intention here is completely aligned with what you're saying, and I think when we develop that project plan, which will come back through the joint committee, we can make sure what we're saying matches what you're asking for.
Could I suggest then, Chair, that perhaps we have phase 2A and 2B, and we select out the things that we need to sync in with our long-term plan in June 18, so that it's quite clear that we and the future proof are in sync with what we're, you know, because there's some on that list that we will need to have a tick off on by June 18 for our long-term plan. And I think Blair's right. If one isn't in sync with the other, then it's going to be quite challenging out there to prove which direction we're going.
Can I suggest that the better option may be just I can add some words to paragraph 2.2.2, which would be reflecting a need to align with the council's long-term plans, which will be completed at June 2018.
Yeah. So that with the implication that future-proof itself looks at that by that time.
By that time,
yeah. So reflect the need for future-proof to align with the council's long-term plans at June 2018 .
Yeah, June 30, 2018.
So, yeah.
Is that right?
Yep, no, that's fine.
I think
yep,
that sort of covers in a big picture way the need for that. Is there any other questions? Sorry, I've got Gary and Paula.
Thank you. And I just noticed that there's a new sort of format for our reports, and I was looking at this one to see what the budget is for it. We used to have on the top of our reports, there used to be a budget box, didn't there? And I noticed that's disappeared on all our reports. So, can you explain what?
So this report is not talking about the future-proof strategy budget or anything. So I'd have to bring that offline, Gary. So this is purely a report on the submission. So
okay, but I noticed that throughout the
the template has changed. You're right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So do we have to ask now every time?
No. A report. There are differing templates of reports, and so. This report, I guess, because we weren't talking about the cost of the strategy, it wasn't. I didn't deem it appropriate, but happy to provide that offline.
Okay.
Okay, and Paula, thanks.
Just following off that previous discussion, once a structure plan is fully in place for peacocks and so on, you could seek to give it the same status as the Ruakura Inland Port got through Future Proof, where it was recognised as a significant development hub, different type of development, housing versus industrial, but you know, that can be achieved at the relevant time. They can be noted as a.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is already a structure plan in place for peacocks. Peacocks is identified in our growth strategy.
Sorry. Probably clumsily put.
So it already is recognised within Future Proof and in our own growth strategies as a priority growth area. The draft strategy acknowledges that our growth sequencing has Rotokauri being developed ahead of Peacock Stage 2, but also acknowledges that there's a Housing Infrastructure Fund application live at the present time, which may change the sequencing of how we deliver those growth cells. So it's recognising the dynamic nature right now of where our growth planning is at.
So we'd want to get that bedded down before we were more definitive about that, wouldn't we?
Well, I think Future Proof doesn't seek to bind us in terms of the sequencing within our growth cells in the city. But I think to Councillor Rob and Councillor Dave's questioning, by the time we get to our long-term plan being agreed at June next year, this council will have clarity as to its growth sequencing as well, in terms of the investment that you are looking to determine. So I think the strategy as written, Paula, covers what you're seeking.
Yeah, well, you're not looking to change a great deal about it, so that's great. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I'm going to move the resolution, and I'm going to, with one addition to reflect what we were talking about before about the LTP future-proof alignment, and that's to add to B, and they're just getting the words at the moment, but it's something like at the end of where it says May 2017 in brackets, noting that the need to align future-proof with Hamilton City Council's long-term plan by, I'll read it, sorry, I've got to head back now. Okay, noting additional comments regarding the need to align the future-proof with Hamilton City Council's LTP at 30 June 2018. Yes. So that gets added to B, what you see in front of you, comma, then that.
So I'm happy with that, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
I'm happy with that. Can I just also note, I don't think it needs to be in the resolution, I'm going to change where it says improve readability, I'm just going to change that to written in plain English.
I think that's just
I'll do it.
sort of a minor editorial thing. It's on the... You're free to correct grammar.
Because, Chair, we need to send a message to the other future-proof partners that this is important to us, isn't it?
Yeah.
That phase, that those aspects of phase 2 are in fact on the table and agreed to by the 30 June 18 when we sign off our long-term plan.
And we've got a seconder to that, Rob?
Yep.
Yep. No, not going to a vote, I'm just... Yep. In red up there?
Oh, I'm just going to change. I'm going to change where it talks about readability.
Oh, you're not putting it in?
No, no.
It's okay.
No.
Thank you.
But he's already noted. Oh, I think we're just accepting that's just a explanation, a better explanation of readability. Any discussion on this, Gary?
Yeah, I'm just concerned, I guess it's more question than discussion or debate. What does aligning it with our long-term plan mean? So projects that are in here automatically go into our long-term plan?
No, it just means that the future-proof strategy needs to reflect and be consistent with where our council gets to in its 10-year plan infrastructure strategy decisions. So we can't have the future-proof strategy describing a growth plan for the city, which is inconsistent with where we get to.
So we can't have future-proof saying we're going to do Temple View tomorrow,
and we have nothing.
When our 10-year plan can't.
Says we're going to do peacocks.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's just about making sure we're all saying the same thing.
Because future-proof is different from the Waikato plan, isn't it? In obviously, but in nature, it's a legal document. Future-proof, isn't it? The future-proof has some legislative power.
Future-proof has some status in that it's consulted, but it's a growth strategy. Its focus is growth and ensuring that in conjunction with NZTA, who are the primary funder of major infrastructure in terms of transport, that across the sub-region of the three councils we plan together where growth is going to occur and the time frame for that, so that infrastructure investment decisions are made to align with that planned growth development.
Okay, Andrew.
So in practice, how does that happen? Are you talking about what you've got in red? Are you talking about lining up phase 2 of future-proof?
Yes.
Not this, we're talking about today?
Phase 2. We're talking about phase 2.
So don't we need to say that? Because, I mean, I'm talking about voting this thing through in the next few months, and you're talking about phase 2, which hasn't even been consulted on yet.
Noting. So where it says in red to align future-proof, you can put future-proof phase 2. That would clarify that, Andrew.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, phase 2. Sorry. Does that have to get consulted on phase 2?
Yes.
So if we put, just to make me more comfortable, and maybe I'm not the, subject to public, what is it? It is public consultation. This is a public consultation thing.
I don't think you need to do that. I mean, that
happens with all of the developments of future-proof, Gary. It's required to be.
Consultation.
Okay.
So just to get this clear as far as the Mayor and Chair Dave are concerned, would we need to make that comment under paragraph 2.2 in the submission where we cover off phase 2? Because in 2.2.2 you mentioned that would be the end of 2018. So do we need to make a comment in our submission that the...
I'm going to amend 2.2.2 to reflect that.
Reflect that. Okay. No.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
The purpose is to make sure that future-proof follows what we want to do in the city
and
for the city area.
And has a bit of urgency.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a tricky one. The 2.2.2, which you're going to amend.
Yes.
By the end of 2018 is a bit sloppy. Is that?
No, I'm going to refer it. I'm going to.
Okay.
Amend it around this word.
And it's meant to be financial year ended 2018. Is that right?
It'll be June 18.
Yes. 30 June 18. Yeah.
Thank you.
Coincides with the long-term plan.
Yep.
So, any more clarifications needed? Okay, I'll put that resolution up there. Those in favour raise their hands. Against? And those on their phones, Gary's against, sorry. And Angela's smiling, so that's we can record that. Okay, so that's carried with 1 against, thanks. Now, councillors, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. 5 minutes late. Actually, 25 minutes late, really.
Yeah, no, that's right.